The scream tore through the pre-dawn silence of Copper Valley like a blade through silk. Janet Morrison's voice, hoarse and raw with panic, shattered the stillness that had blanketed the New Mexico desert town for hours. 3 in the morning and the temperature still hovered near 95 degrees, the kind of heat that made sleep impossible, that turned bedrooms into ovens and drove people to their windows seeking relief that never came. Through her kitchen window, Janet saw something that stopped her heart. A shadow, massive and dark, clearing the 6-foot chain-link fence in a single bound. Moonlight caught the shape mid-leap, a Belgian Malinois, all muscle and fury, something clenched in its jaws. The animal landed in a crouch, then vanished into the darkness between houses. But not before Janet caught the glint of something wet on its muzzle. Something dark. Something that looked like blood. Her hand found the phone. Her voice, when she spoke to the 911 dispatcher, trembled with certainty. "There's been an attack, a dog, I saw it. There's blood." 10 minutes later, Jack Mercer woke to the sound of fists hammering against his garage door. The dream released him slowly, reluctantly. The same dream it had been for 20 years. Fallujah, 2004. The convoy stopped at the intersection, his team sweeping for IEDs. Then the world turning white, then red, then black. The moment that took his left leg below the knee and 3 years of his life to physical therapy and psychiatric care that never quite worked. He sat up on the cot, disoriented, his hand automatically reaching for the phantom limb that wasn't there anymore. The prosthetic leaned against the workbench, titanium and carbon fiber catching the dim light from the single bulb overhead. He'd been sleeping in the garage for 6 months now, ever since Lily moved in. The nightmares were worse when he had to worry about waking someone else. The pounding continued. Voices now, multiple people, angry and afraid in equal measure. Jack strapped on the prosthetic. The routine so automatic he barely registered the clicks and adjustments. 20 years since the blast. The leg still felt wrong every morning. Foreign, a constant reminder of the price he'd paid for a war that ended before he got home from the hospital. He pushed open the garage door to find what looked like half the neighborhood standing in his driveway. 15, maybe 20 people, some in bathrobes, some in t-shirts and boxer shorts, all clutching flashlights or cell phones. Their faces, lit from below, looked grotesque, shadows pooling in eye sockets and under cheekbones. At the front of the group stood Marcus Cross. 35 years old, CrossFit sculpted physique visible even through his designer sleep clothes. A man who'd never worked a day of manual labor in his life, but somehow radiated an authority he hadn't earned. Jack knew the type, had served with officers like him, men who inherited their rank, their wealth, their certainty that the world owed them something. "Your dog," Marcus's voice cut through the murmur of the crowd. "It attacked mine, killed one of my breeding females and stole the rest of the litter." Jack's eyes drifted past Marcus to the corner of the garage, where Atlas sat motionless. The Belgian Malinois, 7 years old and carrying the scars of 3 years in Afghanistan, watched the crowd with the kind of stillness that comes from military training. His muzzle bore dark stains. His breathing came steady and controlled. No aggression in his posture, no fear. Just watchfulness. "Atlas doesn't attack." Jack's voice came out rougher than he intended. Gravel and exhaustion. "There's been a mistake." "Mistake?" Marcus's laugh held no humor. "Janet Morrison saw him jumping my fence with something in his mouth. And now 5 of my puppies are missing, and Zara is dead in my backyard with her throat torn open." The crowd shifted, uncertain energy rippling through them. Jack recognized most of these people. Dorothy Miller, who'd brought him casserole when his wife died. Bob Patterson, who had helped him replace the transmission on his truck. Good people mostly, working people. But fear changed folks, made them forget what they knew about their neighbors. A smaller figure pushed through the crowd. Lily Mercer, 16 years old, looked younger in her oversized hoodie, eyes red-rimmed from crying or lack of sleep or both. She'd been living with Jack for 8 months now, ever since the accident that took her parents, Jack's brother and sister-in-law, on I-25 outside Santa Fe. A drunk driver crossing the median at 70 miles an hour, and suddenly Jack had gone from solitary to guardian, from man barely holding his own life together to someone responsible for keeping another human being alive and sane. "What's happening?" Her voice small, uncertain. Before Jack could answer, Atlas shifted position, drawing everyone's attention. The dog moved with purpose towards something in the shadows of the garage. 5 shapes, small and trembling, huddled together on a pile of old moving blankets. Puppies. Belgian Malinois, maybe 4 weeks old, eyes barely open. Their tiny bodies shook with cold or fear, or both. There, Marcus's voice carried triumph now. There's your evidence. But Lily had already moved to the puppies, her hands gentle as she examined them. She'd been volunteering at the Desert Paws Rescue since before the accident, knew animals the way some people knew languages or mathematics, instinctively, without having to think about it. They're severely dehydrated. She looked up at Jack, then at Marcus, her young face hardening with an adult anger. When did you last give them water? That's none of your business. Marcus took a step forward. Those are my property, registered Belgian Malinois from championship bloodlines. $3,000 each. I want them returned immediately, and I want that animal put down. The words hung in the hot air. Put down. As if Atlas were a malfunctioning machine instead of a living being who'd saved more lives than most of the people standing in this driveway would in their entire existence. Jack felt something shift inside him, a gear engaging after years of coasting in neutral. He'd been trying to disappear since Sarah died, since Travis stopped returning his calls, since the pills stopped working, and the therapist stopped bothering to hide her disappointment in his lack of progress. But there were some things you couldn't let slide. Some lines you couldn't let people cross. No one's putting my dog down. The words came out flat, final. The crowd stirred, uncomfortable now. This wasn't how these things were supposed to go. The man with the dangerous dog was supposed to be apologetic, compliant, eager to make things right. Headlights swept across the scene. A Copper Valley Sheriff's cruiser pulled into the driveway, and Raymond Cole stepped out, moving with the careful deliberation of a man who'd spent 30 years breaking up domestic disputes and traffic accidents in the occasional bar fight. 55 years old, face weathered by the desert sun into something resembling cracked leather. Eyes that had seen too much and believed too little. On his uniform shirt, just above the badge, a small photo badge holder contained the image of a younger man in marine dress blues. Cole Brennan, Raymond's son. Dead 3 years now in the Kabul airport bombing. Killed alongside 12 other service members in the chaotic final days of the Afghanistan withdrawal. Jack and Raymond had a complicated history. Both veterans, both men who'd lost pieces of themselves in wars that ended badly. But Sarah's death had put a wall between them. Raymond had been first on scene at the accident, had tried to save her while Jack was 40 miles away teaching summer school, and something about that had made it impossible for Jack to look the sheriff in the eye anymore. Survivor's guilt, maybe, or just the recognition that Raymond had been there when Sarah needed help, and Jack hadn't. What's the situation? Raymond's voice carried the weight of authority, but his eyes, when they met Jack's, held something else. Not sympathy exactly. Recognition, maybe? The acknowledgement that passed between men who'd both lost too much. Marcus launched into his version of events, words tumbling out in a rush. The dead dog, the stolen puppies, the dangerous animal that needed to be put down before it hurt someone. His hands gestured, emphatic, painting a picture of Jack as either negligent or malicious, of Atlas as a threat that needed to be eliminated. Raymond listened without interrupting, his face giving nothing away. When Marcus finally ran out of steam, the sheriff turned to Jack. You have security cameras? No. Then we've got a problem. Raymond pulled a notepad from his pocket, old school in an age of tablets and smartphones. I'm going to need to hold Atlas while we investigate. Animal control protocol. Like hell. Jack's response came automatic, protective. He'd made promises when he took Atlas in, promises to a dead man whose last request had been that someone take care of his partner, his brother in arms. Atlas stays with me. Jack! Whatever Raymond was about to say got cut off by Lily's voice, sharp with urgency. Uncle Jack, you need to see this. She'd moved to the back corner of the garage, where the dirt floor showed signs of recent digging. Atlas had been excavating here for days, a project Jack had been meaning to investigate and never quite getting around to. Now, in the beam of Lily's flashlight, something glinted in the shallow pit. Metal, corroded, covered in decades of desert dust, but unmistakably manufactured. A box, military grade from the look of it, maybe 2 feet long and a foot deep, and stamped on the lid, barely visible under the rust and grime, 3 letters that made Jack's chest tighten. CIA. Raymond saw it too. His expression shifted, cop instincts overriding everything else. He moved to the hole, knelt, examined the container without touching it. Don't move this. Not a request, an order. This is evidence now. Could be contaminated, could be dangerous. Evidence of what? But Jack already had suspicions forming, memories stirring from places he'd tried very hard to bury. 1991, Kuwait. The things people did when they thought no one was watching. That's what we're going to find out. Raymond stood, brushing dirt from his knees. He looked at Marcus. Take your puppies and go home. And I want to see your property, verify the condition of the mother dog. But now, Mr. Cross. Marcus's face went red, but he had enough sense to recognize when he'd lost the moment. He gathered the puppies, Lily helping despite her obvious reluctance to hand them over, and left with considerably less swagger than he'd arrived with. The crowd dispersed more slowly, reluctant to abandon a scene that had promised drama, but delivered only confusion. When the last of them had gone, Raymond turned back to Jack. The professional mask slipped slightly, revealing something tired underneath. You know what this is? Maybe. Jack's eyes stayed on the metal box. I bought this property in 2010. Previous owner was listed as a trust, names all lawyers and shell companies. I never asked questions, just needed a place I could afford. And now? Now I'm wondering who buried CIA equipment on land I've been living on for 14 years. Raymond was quiet for a moment thinking, then, I need to call this in. Federal property, federal jurisdiction. They'll want to excavate, probably test for hazardous materials. He paused. You and Atlas, you're clear for now, but don't leave town and keep that dog on your property until we sort this out. After Raymond left, Jack stood in the garage and tried to process what had just happened. The confrontation with Marcus, the appearance of the metal box, the way Atlas had led them to it, none of it felt coincidental. The dog had military training, had spent 3 years in Afghanistan sniffing out IEDs and weapons caches. If he'd been digging here, there was a reason. Lily appeared at his elbow, her presence quiet but persistent. What do you think is in there? Nothing good. Jack's hand found Atlas's head, fingers working through the thick fur. The dog leaned into the touch, seeking comfort or offering it or both. Nothing worth burying gets buried by accident. She was quiet for a moment, processing. Then, those puppies were in bad shape, really bad. They hadn't been fed or watered in at least 24 hours, maybe longer. You think Marcus was neglecting them? I think someone was. Her jaw set in a way that reminded Jack painfully of her father, his younger brother, the one who'd always been braver than Jack, always willing to call out injustice even when it cost him. And I think Atlas knew. That's why he brought them here. The idea settled over Jack like a weight. Atlas wasn't attacking, he was rescuing. Doing what he'd been trained to do for 3 years in a war zone. Identify threats, protect the vulnerable, complete the mission regardless of personal risk. Get some sleep. Jack's voice came out softer than he intended. School in the morning. It's summer. Then sleep anyway, this isn't over. She didn't argue, just gave Atlas one last pat and disappeared into the house. Jack stayed in the garage, staring at the hole in the ground, at the metal box that promised to complicate his life in ways he couldn't yet predict. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer, but something, instinct, paranoia, the particular curse of veteran hypervigilance, made him swipe to accept. The voice on the other end came through clear, despite obvious efforts at distortion. Male, educated, carrying the kind of confidence that came from wealth or power or both. Jack Mercer, it's been a long time. Who is this? Someone who pulled you out of a burning vehicle in Kuwait, 1991. Someone who watched you throw away a promising military career because you couldn't understand that war requires difficult choices. The memories came flooding back, unwanted and sharp. Desert Storm, the intelligence unit he'd been attached to. The CIA officer who'd run black ops out of a forward operating base that officially didn't exist. The interrogations that crossed lines, the screaming in Arabic that went on for hours, the casual brutality that Jack had reported and been punished for reporting. Vincent Cross, very good. A pause weighted with meaning. I hear you're having trouble with the neighbors. My son mentioned some unpleasantness involving dogs. The pieces clicked together with sickening clarity. Marcus Cross, Vincent's son, the land purchases around Holloman Air Force Base. The metal box buried in Jack's yard. None of it random, none of it coincidence. What do you want, Vince? To help an old friend. The lie came smooth, practiced. That property you're living on, it has some complicated history. Environmental issues from old military operations could be hazardous. I'm prepared to offer you $500,000 cash for a quick sale, 5 times market value, enough to set yourself and your niece up somewhere safer. Not interested? Jack, be reasonable. He ended the call, stood there in the silence of the garage, feeling the walls close in. Vincent Cross, a ghost from a past Jack had spent decades trying to outrun, and now here in Copper Valley, on property Jack owned through pure chance, sitting on top of whatever Vincent had buried 33 years ago. Atlas whined softly, sensing tension. Jack lowered himself to the concrete floor, joints protesting, and pulled the dog close. They sat there together, man and animal, both carrying scars from wars that should have ended years ago, both understanding that whatever came next would demand everything they had left to give. The eastern sky was starting to lighten, deep purple giving way to bands of orange and pink. Another desert dawn, another day of heat that would drive temperatures past 110 by afternoon. Another day of trying to hold together a life that kept threatening to fall apart. But now there was this, the box, Vincent, the puppies and the dead dog and Marcus's obvious lies. A web of connections Jack couldn't yet see clearly, but knew in his bones spelled trouble. He thought about Sarah, dead 5 years from a cancer that went undiagnosed until it was too late. Thought about Travis, his son, who'd stopped taking his calls after the funeral, who blamed Jack for not pushing Sarah to see doctors sooner, for being so wrapped up in his own PTSD that he'd missed the signs of her illness. Thought about Cole Brennan, Raymond's boy, blown apart in Kabul alongside 12 others while politicians argued about withdrawal timelines and optics. Good people, gone. And men like Vincent, who tortured prisoners in Iraqi detention centers and probably did worse things in places without names. Still walking around free, still accumulating wealth and power, still making phone calls at 3 in the morning to threaten the people who'd had the temerity to witness their crimes. Jack's phone buzzed again. Different number, but he knew it would be Vincent, calling from a burner or a relay or one of a dozen other methods men like him used to stay one step ahead of consequences. He powered the phone off. Whatever Vincent wanted to say could wait. Right now, Jack needed to think, needed to plan, needed to figure out how a washed-up high school history teacher with a prosthetic leg and a traumatized niece and a retired military working dog was going to survive whatever storm was coming. Because it was coming. Jack had been in enough combat to recognize the feeling, the pressure change before an attack, the way the air itself seemed to hold its breath. He'd felt it in Fallujah before the IED went off, felt it in Kuwait before the interrogations went wrong, felt it the night before Sarah's oncologist called with the biopsy results. He felt it now, sitting on the cold concrete of his garage floor at dawn, holding on to a dog that had saved more lives than Jack could count, staring at a hole in the ground that connected him to a past he'd tried so hard to escape. Atlas shifted, pressed in closer. The dog's heartbeat strong and steady against Jack's ribs, a reminder that some bonds couldn't be broken by time or trauma, or the casual cruelty of men who'd learned that power meant never having to answer for what you'd done. It's going to be bad, isn't it? Jack spoke to the dog, to himself, to the ghost of Cole Brennan who'd made Jack promise to take care of his partner if anything happened. Worse than Fallujah, worse than Sarah. Atlas didn't answer, just stayed close, offering the only comfort he knew how to give. Presence, loyalty, the absolute certainty that whatever came next, they'd face it together. The sun cleared the horizon, painting the garage in shades of gold and amber. Another day beginning in Copper Valley, New Mexico. Population 847, unemployment rate 23%, median income $32,000 a year. A dying town in a dying part of the state, kept alive by proximity to Holloman Air Force Base and the military contracts that came with it. And somewhere in this dying town, Vincent was making plans, calling in favors, moving pieces on a board Jack couldn't see yet, but knew existed. Because men like Vincent always had plans, always had backup plans, always had enough money and connections to make problems disappear. Jack wasn't a problem that would disappear easily. He'd learned that much in therapy, in the years after Fallujah when the nightmares were so bad he couldn't sleep more than 2 hours at a stretch. He was stubborn. Survivor's guilt, plus PTSD, plus a deep-seated belief that he'd failed everyone who'd ever counted on him, created a kind of inverse motivation. A determination to not fail again, even if it killed him. Especially if it killed him, because at least then he'd go down fighting instead of slowly dissolving into the kind of defeated irrelevance that seemed to be the default state for broken veterans in forgotten towns. He stood, knees popping, prosthetic legs stiff from sitting on cold concrete. Atlas rose with him, moving with the slight limp that would never fully heal, legacy of the blast that killed Cole and nearly killed the dog. They were a matched pair, Jack thought. Broken things trying to function in a world that had no use for them anymore. But useful or not, they were still here. Still breathing, still capable of causing problems for people who thought the world belonged to them. Jack looked at the metal box one more time, then turned away. Raymond would handle the excavation, bring in federal agents or hazmat teams, or whoever dealt with mysterious CIA containers buried in civilian yards. Jack's job was simpler: protect Lily, protect Atlas, and figure out what Vincent wanted badly enough to make a middle-of-the-night phone call after 33 years of silence. He made coffee in the ancient Mr. Coffee machine that had belonged to Sarah, that still had the faint smell of her lavender lotion despite 5 years of disuse. Lily appeared as the sun fully cleared the horizon, eyes clearer now, some of the shock worn off. "Did you sleep?" "Some." She poured herself orange juice, moved with the economical grace of someone who'd had to grow up too fast. "I've been thinking about the puppies. Don't get attached. They go back to Marcus. He was starving them, Uncle Jack. I saw the mother dog through his fence yesterday. She was in terrible shape, trying to care for 6 puppies in 100-degree heat with no shade and barely any water." That's for Raymond to investigate. And what if Raymond doesn't care? What if Marcus has enough money or connections to make this go away? The question hung between them, uncomfortable in its accuracy. Jack had seen it before, the way wealth insulated people from consequences. Marcus Cross, son of Vincent, probably had lawyers on retainer and judges on speed dial. A neglected dog, even a dead dog, might not be enough to overcome that kind of institutional advantage. Then we document everything. Photos, timestamps, witness statements. Build a case that can't be ignored. Lily's expression shifted, hope mixing with something harder. Her father's daughter through and through. "You believe me." "I believe Atlas." Jack glanced at the dog, who'd positioned himself by the window, watching the street with the patient alertness of a sentry. Canine training doesn't just go away. If he brought those puppies here, it's because they were in danger. The morning passed slowly. Jack tried to grade papers from the previous semester, final exams he still hadn't returned, but the words blurred together. His mind kept circling back to Vincent, to the metal box, to the phone call that had opened a door Jack thought he'd sealed shut decades ago. At 10:30, a white van pulled up. Not federal agents or hazmat, just Maria Santos, 73 years old, driving the same Ford panel van she'd owned since the 1990s. She climbed out with the careful movements of someone whose joints had logged too many miles. Her silver hair pulled back in a severe bun, eyes sharp behind wire-rimmed glasses. Maria had trained military working dogs for 40 years, first for the Army and then as a civilian contractor. She'd retired to Copper Valley 5 years ago, bought the house next to Jack's, and proceeded to involve herself in every aspect of neighborhood life, whether anyone wanted her to or not. Jack found her simultaneously annoying and essential. The kind of person who'd bring you soup when you were sick and then lecture you about your life choices while you ate it. She walked up the driveway without waiting for an invitation, stopped in front of Atlas, and studied him with professional assessment. "So, the famous Atlas?" Her voice carried the faint accent of someone who'd learned English as a second language, but spoken it so long the original tongue had mostly faded. "Cole Brennan's partner. I heard stories." "You knew Cole?" "Trained him and Atlas both at Fort Bliss, 2017, before they deployed." She knelt, ignoring her protesting knees, and ran expert hands over Atlas's frame. The dog accepted the examination without resistance, recognizing competence when he encountered it. "He's in good condition. Better than I expected given the injury." "He manages, more than manages." Maria stood, brushing dust from her khaki pants. "I saw what happened this morning. The crossboy making accusations. News travels fast. News travels at the speed of fear in small towns. She fixed Jack with a look that probably made recruits at Fort Bliss reconsider their life choices. Marcus Cross is lying. I watched those puppies for 2 days. Saw him leave them outside in 110-degree heat with one bowl of water that tipped over the first time the mother dog tried to drink. Saw him ignore them while he took photos for his social media, then go inside and not come back out. You should tell Raymond. I already did. Called him at 6 this morning. Her expression hardened. I also told him what Atlas did. This wasn't an attack, it was a rescue operation. The dog recognized puppies in distress and maternal inability to protect them. He assessed the threat level, developed an extraction plan, and executed it with minimal force and maximum efficiency. Textbook K9 rescue behavior. Jack felt something loosen in his chest, a knot of tension he hadn't realized he was carrying. Validation from someone who knew what they were talking about, who could explain Atlas's actions in terms that made sense, that transformed accusation into heroism. Why are you helping us? Because I trained Cole Brennan. Maria's voice went soft, grief showing through the professional competence. Trained him to be a handler, watched him bond with this dog, sent them both to Afghanistan knowing they might not come back. And when Cole died, I made a promise that if his partner survived, I'd make sure someone took care of him properly. She looked at Jack, really looked, the kind of assessment that went deeper than physical condition. You're doing right by this dog, that matters. I'm just keeping a promise to a dead man. Most people don't even do that much. She turned to leave, then paused. The metal box in your garage, I saw Raymond securing it. You know what's in there? No idea. But you have suspicions. Jack hesitated. But if anyone in Copper Valley could be trusted with ugly truths, it was probably the woman who'd spent 4 decades teaching soldiers to trust animals with their lives. I served with Vincent Cross in Desert Storm, CIA paramilitary officer. He ran interrogations that crossed lines, violated Geneva Conventions. I reported him. He got reassigned. I got sidelined. End of story. Except it's not. Maria's eyes narrowed. Vincent Cross owns 70% of the land around Holloman Air Force Base. His development company has 16 active contracts with the Department of Defense. And his son just accused your dog of murder the same week a CIA container surfaces in your yard. She let that sink in. You think that's coincidence? I think it's the kind of coincidence that gets people killed. Then you need to be very careful, Jack Mercer. She started toward her van, then stopped one more time. I have resources, contacts at Fort Bliss, at the Pentagon, at agencies I'm not supposed to mention. If you need help, you ask. Cole would have wanted that. After she left, Jack sat on his porch and tried to process the morning's revelations. The puppies were evidence of neglect, not theft. Atlas was a hero, not a threat. And Vincent, the ghost from Jack's past, had a son who just tried to weaponize the justice system against the one person who could testify to crimes committed 3 decades ago. The pattern was starting to emerge. Blurry still, incomplete, but taking shape. Vincent wanted this land, wanted it badly enough to send his son to create legal pretext for seizure, badly enough to make middle-of-the-night phone calls offering ridiculous sums of money. The question was why? What was in that metal box? What had Vincent buried here 33 years ago that was worth this much trouble, this much risk, this much attention? Jack's phone rang. He'd powered it back on after Maria left, half expecting Vincent to try again. But the caller ID showed Raymond Cole's office number. We examined Marcus Cross's property. Raymond's voice came through flat, professional, stripped of emotion. The mother dog is in critical condition. Severe dehydration, mastitis from inability to nurse properly, evidence of heat stroke. We're taking her to emergency veterinary care. And Marcus claims he hired someone to care for the animals. That person didn't show up. Says it's not his fault. A pause. But we found something else. Records of puppy sales. 12 in the past 6 months, all cash transactions, all to buyers who paid premium prices for protection-trained animals. He's running a puppy mill. More than that, we contacted some of the buyers, asked what kind of training their dogs had received. None of them knew what we were talking about. They bought pets, not protection animals, but they paid protection animal prices. Jack's mind raced, fitting pieces together. He's scamming people, selling ordinary puppies as trained guard dogs. That's fraud. Multiple counts, plus animal neglect, plus filing false police reports about Atlas. Raymond's voice held grim satisfaction. Marcus Cross is in serious legal trouble. His father will make it go away. His father can try, but we've got photos, we've got vet records, we've got witness statements from Maria Santos and others. This isn't going away easy. After the call ended, Jack sat in silence, watching heat shimmer rise from the asphalt. Noon had pushed the temperature past 105, the kind of day where even lizards stayed in the shade, where the desert itself seemed to hold its breath, waiting for mercy that wouldn't come until sunset. Lily appeared in the doorway. "I'm going to the store. We need groceries. Take my truck and be careful." She nodded, grabbed keys, disappeared. Normal teenage things, the kind of mundane activity that felt surreal given everything else happening. But life went on. Even when you were standing on top of a CIA weapons cache, while the son of a war criminal tried to steal your property, you still needed milk and bread and whatever else 16-year-olds put in shopping carts. Jack's phone buzzed. Text message, unknown number. "We need to talk, in person. I'm in town. V." His hands tightened on the phone, knuckles white. Vincent was here, in Copper Valley. After 33 years of silence, the man had decided to show up personally rather than handle this through lawyers or phone calls or whatever other methods billionaire war criminals used to get what they wanted. Jack typed, "No." The response came instantly. "Your choice. But you should know, there are things in that box that could destroy both of us. Things that implicate you as much as me." The lie was transparent, crude even. Jack had been a witness, not a participant, had reported what he saw, suffered consequences for his honesty. Whatever was in that container, it belonged to Vincent alone. But the threat was clear. If Jack pushed this, if he let federal agents open that box and discover whatever horrors Vincent had buried, there would be blowback. Accusations, a smear campaign designed to muddy the waters, to transform Jack from witness to accomplice, to make sure that if Vincent went down, he took everyone around him into the grave. Classic CIA tactics, scorched earth, mutually assured destruction, the kind of psychological warfare Vincent had practiced on prisoners in Kuwait, now aimed at a man he'd once called brother in arms. Jack's fingers hovered over the keyboard. Part of him wanted to tell Vincent exactly where to go, to dare him to bring his worst and see what happened. But another part, the part that had survived Fallujah, that had buried a wife and lost a son and somehow kept getting up every morning, that part knew better. You didn't win fights like this through confrontation. You won through patience, through building cases that couldn't be denied, through finding allies and resources and leverage points that men like Vincent didn't see coming. He typed, 48 hours. Then I go to the FBI with everything. Vincent's response, "You're making a mistake, Jack. I'm trying to help you. Help yourself. Stay away from my family." He powered the phone off again, pocketed it, sat there feeling his heart pound against his ribs. Adrenaline dump, same as combat. The body preparing for violence that might not come for hours or days or weeks, but felt imminent in the way the air tasted, the way shadows fell, the way Atlas had started pacing by the door. 20 minutes later, Lily called from the road, her voice tight, controlled, the way she got when she was trying not to panic. "There's a car following me, black SUV, tinted windows. It's been behind me since I left the store." Jack was on his feet, moving toward his truck. "Where are you?" "Highway 70, heading west. I took the long way to see if they'd keep following, and they did." "Drive to the sheriff's office. Don't go home. I'm on my way." He grabbed the keys, grabbed the Glock from the lockbox he kept in the closet. Sarah's gun, the one he'd taught her to shoot, but she'd never had cause to use, and headed for the truck. Atlas jumped in without being told, sensing urgency, falling into old patterns from deployments where urgency meant incoming fire, and you moved or you died. But before Jack could pull out of the driveway, another vehicle turned onto his street. Not a black SUV, a silver Mercedes S-Class, the kind of car that cost more than most houses in Copper Valley, windows down despite the heat, air conditioning running full blast in defiance of environmental responsibility or common sense. The Mercedes stopped in front of Jack's house. The driver's door opened. Vincent Cross stepped out, and Jack felt 33 years collapse into nothing. He looked good. That was the first thought, unwanted and bitter. 62 years old, and Vincent looked like he'd stepped out of a golf magazine. Tanned, fit, silver hair expertly styled, wearing a suit that probably cost $5,000, and somehow didn't show a single wrinkle despite the desert heat. The kind of aging that came from wealth and personal trainers, and probably some discreet cosmetic surgery. They stood there 10 feet apart, two men who'd once saved each other's lives, now separated by decades and choices in the particular kind of hatred that only grows between people who've seen each other at their worst. Vincent smiled, the same smile Jack remembered from Kuwait, the one that came out right before the interrogation started, right before things got ugly in ways that would haunt Jack for the rest of his life. "Hello, Jack. You're looking well? Get off my property. I'm on the street, public easement." Vincent glanced at the house, at the garage, at Atlas visible through the truck's window. "Nice dog, Cole Brennan's partner, I understand. Tragic what happened in Kabul. So many young people dead because politicians couldn't make hard decisions. You've got 30 seconds to state your business and leave. Always so hostile." Vincent shook his head, performance of disappointment. "I'm here as a friend, Jack, to make you an offer. $600,000 for this property, cash, no questions asked. You and your niece can start over somewhere safe, somewhere without complicated history. Not interested? You should be." Vincent's smile faded slightly. "Because that history is about to become very public. Federal agents will excavate that box, find things inside, ask questions about how it got there, and some of those questions will be directed at you. I bought this land in 2010. Whatever's in that container, it was here long before I arrived. Can you prove that? Can you provide documentation showing the chain of custody, showing you had no knowledge of what was buried here?" Vincent took a step closer. "I can provide documentation showing we worked together in 1991, showing you had access to CIA equipment, showing you participated in operations that required disposal of sensitive materials. I can paint a picture that puts you right in the middle of whatever's in that box." "That's a lie. Lies become truth when you have enough lawyers and enough money." Vincent's eyes were cold now, calculations showing through the friendly facade. "I'm offering you a way out. Take the money, disappear, let me handle the cleanup." Jack's phone buzzed. Text from Lily. "SUV still following, at sheriff's office now." Raymond came out and it drove away. Relief flooded through him, followed immediately by rage. Vincent had sent someone to follow his niece, to intimidate her, to send a message that reached beyond Jack, that threatened the one person in his life he still had left to protect. "You sent someone after Lily. I have no idea what you're talking about." But Vincent's expression said otherwise. Said he knew exactly what Jack meant and didn't care. That threatening a 16-year-old girl was just business, just leverage, just another tool in the arsenal of a man who'd learned that power meant never having to pretend to care about collateral damage. Jack's hand moved toward the Glock before he consciously decided to reach for it. Training taking over, muscle memory from Fallujah and the shooting range, and 20 years of carrying the weight of violence potential. Vincent saw the movement, held up his hands in mock surrender. "Careful, Jack. Threatening a federal contractor? That's a serious crime, especially with witnesses." Jack looked past Vincent, saw the Mercedes' passenger window down, saw a man with a camera pointed at them. Recording. Building a case for self-defense or assault or whatever legal fiction Vincent would spin if Jack actually pulled the gun. He forced his hand away from the weapon, forced himself to breathe, forced the combat reflex back into its cage. This wasn't Iraq. This wasn't a war zone. This was New Mexico. And there were rules. And breaking those rules would hurt Lily more than it would hurt Vincent. 48 hours. Jack's voice came out steady despite the adrenaline screaming through his system. "Then I tell the FBI everything. About Kuwait, about the interrogations, about the prisoners who disappeared, about all of it. You do that and you'll destroy yourself." Vincent's smile returned, confident now. "I have resources you can't imagine. Lawyers who've made far bigger problems than you disappear. Friends in agencies you've never heard of. You're a high school history teacher with PTSD and a dead wife and an estranged son. I'm a respected businessman with billions of dollars and friends in the Pentagon. Who do you think they'll believe? The evidence? What evidence? A 33-year-old box that could contain anything? Recordings that could be fabricated? Testimony from a man with documented mental health issues?" Vincent shook his head. "You're fighting a war you can't win, Jack. Take the money, walk away, live to fight another day, if you must fight at all." He turned back to the Mercedes, paused with his hand on the door. "You have 48 hours to reconsider." After that, things get unpleasant for everyone. The car pulled away, leaving Jack standing in his driveway, shaking with rage and fear, and the terrible knowledge that Vincent was right about one thing. This was a war Jack couldn't win through conventional means. The law, the courts, the federal bureaucracy, all of it was designed to protect men like Vincent, men with resources and connections and the institutional memory that came from decades of trading favors and buying influence. But wars weren't won through conventional means, not the ones that mattered. Jack had learned that in Fallujah, learned it again when Sarah died, and the hospital bills came, and the insurance company found 7 different ways to deny claims. You survived by being stubborn, by refusing to quit, by finding allies in unexpected places and pressure points in seemingly impenetrable defenses. He pulled out his phone, powered it on, called Maria Santos. "I need help. Tell me what you need. Everything you have on Vincent Cross, every contact you have at the Pentagon, at Fort Bliss, at the agencies you're not supposed to mention. Every piece of leverage we can find." Maria was quiet for a moment, then, "You're going to war with a billionaire. He went to war with me first. I'm just returning fire." "Good." The satisfaction in her voice was palpable. "Come to my house tonight, 8 o'clock. I'll have what you need." Jack drove to the sheriff's, found Lily safe inside, Raymond standing guard like he'd promised. The SUV hadn't returned, but the message had been delivered. Nowhere was safe, no one was protected. Vincent could reach anyone he wanted, whenever he wanted. They drove home in silence, Lily processing her fear, Jack processing his options. Atlas sat between them, steady presence. Reminder that loyalty transcended species and that promises made to dead men didn't expire just because keeping them got difficult. At 7:30 that evening, as the desert sun finally released its grip and the temperature dropped towards something approaching bearable, Jack and Lily walked next door to Maria Santos's house. She answered the door, wearing reading glasses and a grim expression, led them to a dining room table covered in manila folders and printouts and photos that Jack recognized immediately as intelligence briefing materials. "I made some calls," Maria gestured at the evidence. "Called in favors from people who owe me. People who remember what Vincent Cross did in Kuwait and Iraq and Afghanistan. People who've been waiting for someone to finally hold him accountable." Jack picked up the nearest folder, flipped it open, felt his world shift. Inside were photos. Not the sanitized publicity shots of Vincent at charity galas or ribbon cuttings. These were different. Vincent in Kuwait, 1991, standing next to bound prisoners. Vincent in Iraq, 2003, conferring with men who looked like private military contractors. Vincent in Afghanistan, 2011, at a black site that officially didn't exist. And documents. Transaction records showing weapons transfers. Communications linking Vincent to an arms dealer named Michael Ferraro. Evidence of a network that went far beyond one man's crimes, that implicated dozens of people in a conspiracy that spanned 3 decades in multiple continents. "Where did you get this?" Jack's voice barely above a whisper. "People talk to old women, especially old women who trained their dogs, who taught them to trust their lives to animals." Maria's smile held no warmth. "I've been collecting this for 3 years, ever since Cole Brennan died in Kabul, and I started asking questions about why a Marine deployment got extended, why security was so lax, why the attack happened when and where it did." "You think Vincent was involved in Cole's death?" "I think Cole found out something he shouldn't have. I think he was preparing to report it, and I think someone made sure he never got the chance." She met Jack's eyes. "Proving it is another matter. But this," she gestured at the evidence, "this is a start." Jack spent that night at Maria's dining room table, methodically working through 3 decades of Vincent Cross's crimes. The evidence came in layers, surface transactions that looked legitimate until you followed the money backward, found the shell companies, the offshore accounts, the pattern of payments that coincided with weapon shipments and black site interrogations and Marine deployments that ended in catastrophe. Lily had fallen asleep on Maria's couch around midnight, exhausted by fear and adrenaline crash. Atlas lay beside her, one eye always half open, maintaining the eternal vigilance that separated working dogs from pets. Jack envied them both the ability to rest. His own mind wouldn't stop racing, connecting dots, seeing patterns, building the case that would either save them or get them all killed. This photo, Jack held up an image from 2011 Afghanistan. Vincent in tactical gear, standing beside a man Jack didn't recognize. Who's this? Maria leaned closer, squinting through her reading glasses. Michael Ferraro, arms dealer out of Nevada, sold weapons to anyone with cash. Cartels, militias, private military companies that weren't particular about Geneva Conventions. She paused. FBI arrested him in 2019 on RICO charges. He's in federal prison in Colorado now, serving 25 to life. Would he talk? About Vincent? Maria's laugh held no humor. Ferraro stayed loyal to his clients. That's why he only got 25 instead of execution. He knew things that could bring down half the defense establishment, and he kept his mouth shut. Jack set the photo aside, moved to the next document. Bank transfers from Cross Development Corporation to a consulting firm in the Cayman Islands. The consulting firm's CEO listed as someone named Thomas Kellerman. The name triggered recognition. Major Kellerman, the officer who tried to stop Vincent in Kuwait, who died in that convenient Jeep accident 3 days after recording the interrogation tapes. Kellerman had a son. Maria nodded. Thomas Kellerman Jr. went into private military contracting after his father died, made a fortune during the Iraq surge, retired to the Caribbean in 2015. She pulled out another folder. I reached out to him 2 years ago, asked if he'd testify about what his father witnessed. He declined, said some ghosts were better left buried. Maybe he'll change his mind now that those ghosts are literally being dug up in my backyard. The words came out bitter. Jack had spent 20 years trying to move past Desert Storm, past the interrogations, past the moment when he'd chosen conscience over career and learned that the military punished whistleblowers more severely than war criminals. And now here it all was again, dragged back into daylight by Atlas's digging and Vincent's greed and the particular curse of living on land that held secrets men would kill to protect. His phone buzzed. Text from Raymond. Federal agents arrive tomorrow, 9 a.m. to excavate the box. They want to interview you. Bring a lawyer if you have one. Jack didn't have a lawyer, couldn't afford one on a teacher's salary that barely covered mortgage and Lily's expenses. The public defender's office might assign someone, but that would take days, and tomorrow was in 9 hours. He showed the message to Maria. She read it, frowned, pulled out her phone, and dialed without asking permission. Frank, it's Maria Santos. I need a favor. Pause. No, not dog training. Legal representation, military criminal defense, federal jurisdiction. Needs to be tomorrow morning. Another pause. I'll owe you. Yes, I know what that means. Send me the paperwork. She hung up, looked at Jack. Frank Castellano, JAG lawyer, retired colonel, now does private practice out of El Paso. He'll be here at 7 a.m. to prep you. I can't afford. You're not paying, I am. And before you argue, remember that you're the only person who can testify about what Vincent did in 1991. If you go down, so does any chance of holding him accountable. Her expression softened slightly. Cole would want you protected, so do I. Jack wanted to argue, wanted to maintain the stubborn independence that had defined his life since Sarah died. But pride was a luxury he couldn't afford anymore. Not with Lily sleeping 10 feet away, not with federal agents coming to dig up evidence that Vincent would use to destroy him if given the chance. Thank you. Save your thanks for after we win. Maria started gathering files back into folders, organizing evidence into categories that made sense only to her. Get some sleep. Tomorrow's going to be difficult. But sleep wouldn't come. Jack lay on Maria's guest room floor. She'd offered the bed, he'd declined, and stared at the ceiling, watching shadows shift as cars passed outside. Atlas had abandoned Lily's couch to join him, warm weight pressed against Jack's side, heartbeats steady in the darkness. We're in over our heads, aren't we? Jack's whisper barely disturbed the silence. Teacher and a broken dog against a billionaire with Pentagon connections. Atlas shifted, rested his chin on Jack's chest. The dog's eyes caught ambient light, reflecting it back as that eerie green glow unique to canines. No judgment there, no doubt. Just the patient certainty of an animal who'd survived war zones and bombing runs and the death of his handler, who'd learned that survival meant loyalty, and loyalty meant staying when every instinct screamed to run. Jack's hand found the scar on Atlas's flank, fingers tracing the ridge of tissue where shrapnel had torn through fur and muscle and nearly ended both their stories. The dog bore it without complaint, the way he bore everything. Stoic acceptance that pain was part of the package, That scars proved you'd survive things that should have killed you. I promised Cole I'd take care of you. Jack's voice rougher now, emotion pushing past the barriers he'd built. But it feels like all I've done is drag you into another war. Atlas licked his hand once, then settled back into position. The gesture meant nothing and everything. Dogs didn't understand promises or wars or the complicated mathematics of moral debt. They understood loyalty. They understood pack. They understood that you stayed with your people through whatever came next because the alternative was dying alone. Jack must have dozed eventually because suddenly light was filtering through the window and Maria was shaking his shoulder. "Coffee's ready. Your lawyer's here." Frank Castellano looked exactly like what he was, a man who'd spent 30 years navigating military justice and come out the other side with enough scars to respect the system and enough cynicism to not trust it. 60 years old, barrel-chested, shaved head that showed liver spots from too many years in desert sun, wearing a suit that had been expensive once and was now just well-maintained. He sat at Maria's kitchen table with a legal pad and a recording device. Eyes that had probably interrogated enemy combatants and defended soldiers accused of war crimes fixing on Jack with professional assessment. "Maria says you witnessed CIA interrogations in Kuwait that violated Geneva Conventions, that the officer running those interrogations is now trying to destroy evidence and discredit you, that federal agents are going to excavate a container from your property that may contain proof of those crimes. That's the situation. And you reported these violations through proper channels in 1991, faced retaliation, and have been trying to move on with your life ever since." Frank's pen scratched notes. "But the past doesn't stay buried, especially when it's literally buried in your backyard." "Apparently not. Here's what's going to happen this morning. Federal agents will arrive, probably FBI and maybe CIA given the classification of the container. They'll ask you questions. You will answer exactly what I tell you to answer, and you will volunteer nothing." Frank leaned forward. "Vincent Cross has resources. He will have already contacted friends at these agencies, provided his version of events, painted you as either complicit or unreliable. Your job is to stick to facts, avoid speculation, and let the evidence speak for itself. What if they ask about my mental health, my PTSD diagnosis? Then I'll object on medical privacy grounds. But Jack, I need to know, are you stable enough for this? Because if you break down under questioning, if you give them any reason to doubt your competence, they'll use it to dismiss everything you say." The question hung there, brutal in its honesty. Jack thought about the nightmares, the pills he'd stopped taking because they made him feel dead inside, the therapy sessions he'd abandoned because talking about Fallujah just meant reliving it over and over until the past bled into the present and he couldn't tell which explosion was memory and which was panic attack. "I'm stable enough to tell the truth. Whether they believe it is up to them." Frank studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "Good enough. Let's go over your timeline, get your story straight. When this starts, there's no room for uncertainty or hesitation. You were there, you saw what you saw, you reported it, you suffered for it. That's your narrative. We don't deviate." They spent the next 90 minutes rehearsing testimony, Frank asking the kind of questions prosecutors would ask, poking holes in Jack's memory, forcing him to distinguish between what he'd witnessed directly and what he'd heard secondhand. It was exhausting, precise work, made worse by the weight of knowing that mistakes here could mean prison or worse. Lily woke up around 7:30, disoriented, took a moment to remember where she was and why. Atlas went to her immediately, pressed against her legs in the way he did when sensing distress. She buried her face in his fur, shoulders shaking silently. Jack wanted to go to her, wanted to promise it would be okay, wanted to be the kind of guardian who could actually protect the people he was responsible for. But he was stuck at this table, rehearsing testimony, preparing for a confrontation that would determine whether they survived what came next. Maria handled it instead, guiding Lily to the kitchen, making toast and orange juice, and providing the kind of practical comfort that Jack had never learned how to give. Women understood these things better. Sarah had been the emotional center of their family, the one Travis had gone to with problems, the one who'd known how to make hurt things feel safe. Jack had been the distant one, the one too wrapped up in nightmares and medication to notice when his wife was dying or his son was drowning in grief. "Focus!" Frank's voice cut through the spiral. "You're drifting. When they ask about Major Kellerman's death, What do you say? Jack pulled himself back. I say that Kellerman died in a vehicle accident 3 days after recording interrogation sessions that violated Geneva Conventions. I say that I found the timing suspicious, but had no proof of foul play. I say that Kellerman told me he was documenting evidence in case something happened to him. Good. And if they ask why you didn't pursue the investigation? Because I was a junior EOD tech with no authority, and a superior officer who'd made it clear that asking questions about CIA operations was career suicide. Perfect. Remember that tone, factual, slightly bitter, but not defensive. You were a soldier following orders in an impossible situation. They'll understand that. At 8:45, the first federal vehicles appeared. 2 black SUVs, government plates, moving with the deliberate caution of people who'd been briefed on potential hostiles. They parked in front of Jack's house, and 6 people emerged. 4 FBI agents in windbreakers, 2 civilians in suits who screamed CIA despite the lack of obvious identification. Raymond's cruiser was already there, had been since dawn. The sheriff stood on Jack's porch like a sentinel, making it clear that whatever happened next would happen under his observation. It was a small gesture of support, probably meaningless in legal terms, but it steadied Jack more than he wanted to admit. Frank checked his watch. Time to go. Remember, stick to the script, volunteer nothing, and if I touch your arm, you stop talking immediately. They walked across Maria's yard to Jack's property. Frank in his lawyer suit and Jack in the cleanest clothes he owned, which still looked shabby next to federal agent polyester. Atlas came with them unbidden, taking position at Jack's side the way he'd been trained, the way he'd walked into hostile villages in Helmand Province with Cole Brennan, knowing that danger was coming but refusing to abandon his handler. The lead FBI agent introduced herself as Special Agent Sarah Reeves, unfortunate name given Jack's dead wife, another ghost to haunt this morning. She had the professional courtesy of someone who'd done this 1,000 times, knew how to be polite while simultaneously making clear that politeness was a courtesy, not a right. Mr. Mercer, I'm here to oversee the excavation of a container found on your property. We'll need to ask you some questions about how it got here and what you know about its contents. My client will cooperate fully with factual questions about the timeline of his property ownership. Frank's voice carried the weight of decades navigating federal bureaucracy. But he has no knowledge of the container's origins or contents beyond what he's already reported to local law enforcement. One of the CIA civilians stepped forward, 40-something expensive suit, the kind of face that had learned to reveal nothing. I'm David Morrison, Intelligence Community Inspector General's Office. That container bears classification markings that suggest it contains sensitive national security materials. We need to establish whether Mr. Mercer had authorization to possess such materials. My client purchased this property in 2010 through legal channels. The container was buried before his ownership. He discovered it accidentally and immediately reported it to authorities. Frank pulled out a folder, handed over documents. Property deed, title insurance, disclosure statements from the sale. Everything's documented. Morrison flipped through pages, expression unchanging. The previous owner was a trust controlled by shell companies. We're still tracing the ownership chain, but shell companies don't bury CIA equipment. People do. People with access and motive. Are you suggesting my client had access to CIA materials in 1991? I'm suggesting he served in an intelligence unit during Desert Storm with access to classified operations. I'm suggesting he may have taken materials that didn't belong to him. Frank's hand touched Jack's arm, the signal to stay quiet. If you're accusing Mr. Mercer of a crime, charge him. Otherwise, these fishing expeditions end now. The tension ratcheted up, federal authority meeting legal resistance, the kind of standoff Jack had seen in military contexts but never experienced as a subject. He forced himself to breathe evenly, to keep his expression neutral, to not give these people any reason to label him unstable or uncooperative. Agent Reeves intervened, playing peacemaker. Let's start with the excavation. Mr. Mercer, we'll need you to stay available for questions, but you're not under arrest or detention. You're free to observe the process. They moved to the garage where the hole Atlas had dug now had crime scene tape around it and evidence markers on the ground. A hazmat team was already setting up portable X-ray equipment and Geiger counters and protective suits that suggested they were taking the possibility of contamination seriously. The excavation took 3 hours. Methodical, documented, Every layer of soil photographed and cataloged. Jack watched from his porch, Frank beside him, as strangers dug into his property and extracted secrets that weren't his. When they finally lifted the container free, everyone fell silent. It was bigger than it had looked partially buried. Military-grade metal, secured with a lock that had corroded but still held. The CIA markings were clear now, stenciled in paint that had faded but remained legible. Special Activities Division. Classified. The hazmat team ran tests. No radiation, no chemical contamination, just an old box that held old secrets. Morrison, supervised as a specialist, worked on the lock, carefully preserving it for forensic analysis while still managing to get the container open. The lid lifted with a groan of protesting metal. Inside, exactly what Jack had feared. Audio cassettes, maybe 20 of them, each labeled with dates from February and March 1991. Photographs, prisoners, interrogations, equipment that shouldn't have existed at a forward operating base that officially ran only logistics support. Documents in plastic sleeves. CIA internal memos discussing interrogation techniques and intelligence gathering methods that crossed every line the Geneva Conventions had drawn. And at the bottom, wrapped in canvas, a service pistol, Beretta M9, serial number filed off but military issue unmistakable. The kind of weapon that could have killed Major Kellerman and been buried here with the evidence he'd collected. Agent Reeves pulled on gloves, carefully extracted one cassette, held it up to read the label. Her expression shifted, professional mask slipping slightly. Whatever she'd expected to find, it hadn't been this. Morrison moved fast, stepping between Reeves and the container. That material is classified. It needs to be secured and transported immediately to a proper facility. It's also evidence in a potential murder investigation. Reeves didn't back down. Major Malcolm Kellerman died 3 days after these recordings were made. His death was ruled accidental, but it was never properly investigated. Major Kellerman's death is outside FBI jurisdiction, not if it was murder. Reeves looked past Morrison to Jack. Mr. Mercer, did you know Major Kellerman? Frank's hand touched Jack's arm again, but Jack had already decided. The truth was the only weapon he had, and hiding it now would just make everything worse. I knew him. He was my commanding officer for 6 weeks in Kuwait. He was a good man who tried to stop things that shouldn't have been happening. What kind of things? Interrogations that violated the laws of armed conflict. Torture, technically, though the CIA probably has prettier words for it. Jack's voice stayed level, factual, the way Frank had coached. Major Kellerman documented what he saw because he didn't trust the official channels to handle it. He told me he was creating an insurance policy, proof that couldn't be dismissed or destroyed. And then he died. And then he died. In a Jeep accident that happened in the middle of the desert on a clear day with no other vehicles around. The investigation concluded mechanical failure. No one looked deeper because no one wanted to find what they'd find. Morrison's face had gone carefully blank. Mr. Mercer, you're making serious allegations against United States intelligence operations. I'm stating facts. You wanted to know how that container got here. Now you know. Someone, probably Kellerman himself, buried evidence where he thought it would be safe. And then someone else killed him to make sure it stayed buried. Do you have proof of this? You're holding the proof. Those tapes, those photos, those documents. That's 33 years of evidence that people have been trying to hide. People with resources and connections and enough power to make a teacher with PTSD look crazy for suggesting that maybe, just maybe, war criminals should answer for their crimes. The words came out harsher than Jack intended, emotion bleeding through despite Frank's coaching. But he was tired of being careful, tired of measuring every syllable, tired of pretending that truth was something that needed to be managed rather than spoken. Reeves and Morrison exchanged a look, some kind of silent communication that excluded everyone else. Then Reeves nodded, turned back to Jack. We'll need a full statement. Everything you witnessed in Kuwait, everything Kellerman told you, everything you know about how this container ended up here. She glanced at Morrison, and it will be an FBI statement on the record with full Fifth Amendment protections. Morrison looked like he wanted to argue, but too many witnesses now. Raymond, Frank, Maria watching from her porch, even a few neighbors who'd gathered at the property line, drawn by the spectacle of federal agents in hazmat suits. Whatever CIA damage control he'd been planning, it couldn't happen in public. Fine, but that material stays in federal custody until its classification status is reviewed. Agreed. Reeves turned to her team. Bag and tag everything. I want full chain of custody documentation. This goes directly to the evidence facility. No stops, no detours. They worked for another hour, cataloging and removing every item from the container. Jack watched it all disappear into evidence bags and sealed boxes, felt a strange mix of relief and loss. Those cassettes represented Kellerman's last attempt at justice, his final insurance policy against the men who'd killed him. And now they were gone, absorbed into a federal bureaucracy that might study them or might bury them even deeper than before. When the agents finally left, promising to call Jack in for a formal statement within 48 hours, he stood in his driveway and felt the adrenaline drain away, leaving only exhaustion. You did good. Frank packed his briefcase, preparing to drive back to El Paso. Stuck to facts, didn't speculate, made them work for everything. Morrison wanted to rattle you, make you seem unreliable. You didn't give him the satisfaction. What happens now? Now the FBI investigates. They'll review the evidence, cross-reference with historical records, probably interview other people who served in that unit. Frank paused. And Vincent Cross will be calling his lawyers, preparing his defense, marshaling every resource he has to make this go away. You should expect retaliation. More than sending someone to follow my niece? Much more. This isn't about intimidation anymore. This is about survival. If those tapes contain what you say they contain, Vincent's looking at war crimes charges, possible criminal conspiracy, decades in federal prison. Men like him don't go down quietly. After Frank left, Jack went inside his house for the first time since yesterday's confrontation. Everything looked the same but felt different, contaminated by the knowledge of what had been buried underneath, the secrets that had been leaching into the soil while he'd lived here oblivious. Atlas followed him from room to room, maintaining close proximity, the way he did when he sensed threat but couldn't identify the source. Jack's phone buzzed constantly, texts from fellow teachers asking if everything was okay, from neighbors who'd seen the federal presence, from a reporter at the Alamogordo Daily News who somehow already knew about the excavation. He ignored them all. The only person he needed to talk to was Lily, and she'd retreated to her room after the agents left, processing fear and confusion in the solitary way teenagers did. Jack knocked softly on her door. Can I come in? It's your house. He took that as permission. Found her sitting on her bed with her laptop, ostensibly doing summer homework, but actually staring at a blank screen. Atlas went to her immediately, rested his head on her knee. I'm sorry. The words felt inadequate, insufficient, but they were all Jack had. This wasn't supposed to be your problem. You came here to be safe after your parents died, and instead I've dragged you into something dangerous. You didn't drag me. This was already here, buried under your garage. She looked up, eyes red but dry. What did those men do? In Kuwait, I mean, what's on those tapes? Jack considered lying, softening the truth, protecting her from ugliness. But Lily had earned honesty through everything she'd survived, and treating her like a child would be insulting. They tortured people, prisoners who might have had information, or might have just been in the wrong place when soldiers were looking for someone to blame. They used techniques that are illegal under international law and immoral under any moral framework I recognize. And when someone tried to stop them, tried to document what was happening, they killed him and buried the evidence. And now they're trying to kill you? I don't know, maybe just discredit me, make me look unreliable so nothing I say matters. Vincent Cross has built an empire on the foundation of those crimes. He can't afford for the truth to come out. Lily was quiet for a long moment, processing. Then, what are we going to do? The question carried weight Jack hadn't expected. Not, what are you going to do, but what are we? Lily claiming ownership of this problem, refusing to be protected or excluded, demanding the right to fight alongside him. We're going to tell the truth and let the system work. Even as Jack said it, he heard how naive it sounded. And if the system fails, we'll find another way. You don't believe the system will work. I believe it should. I want it to. But I've seen too many times when wealth and connections override justice. He sat down on the bed beside her, careful not to crowd her space. Your dad believed in the system more than I did. He was always the optimistic one, the one who thought institutions could be reformed if people just tried hard enough. I was the cynical one who thought the whole thing was rigged. Who was right? Neither of us. Both of us. The system works sometimes and fails sometimes, and you can't predict which until you test it. Jack looked at his niece, saw so much of his brother in her. The same stubborn jaw, the same refusal to accept injustice quietly. But even when it fails, you keep trying. Because giving up means letting the Vincent Crosses of the world win by default. His phone rang. Unknown number, but when Jack answered, the voice was familiar in the worst way. You're making this harder than it needs to be. Vincent's tone carried disappointment, like a teacher frustrated with a struggling student. The FBI has the evidence now. They'll study it, analyze it, and conclude that 33-year-old recordings are insufficient basis for charges. Too much ambiguity, too many ways to interpret events, too many opportunities for reasonable doubt, and in the meantime, you've made yourself a target. Jack walked out of Lily's room, not wanting her to hear this. If the evidence is so weak, why do you care? Because you're forcing me to spend resources managing a problem that should have stayed buried. Because you're risking exposure of classified operations for personal vendetta. Because you're too stubborn to see that some fights aren't worth fighting. Major Kellerman thought they were worth fighting. So did your brother. The silence on the other end was profound, heavy with things unsaid. Then Vincent's voice came back colder, stripped of false friendliness. Don't talk about Danny. You don't have the right. Danny Cross died because of an IED. The prisoner you tortured and killed might have been involved in building it, or might have been a random Iraqi who got grabbed because intelligence needed someone to interrogate. You never knew for sure, did you? You just wanted someone to hurt, someone to punish, someone to make pay for your brother's death. I wanted justice, something you've always been too weak to pursue. No. Jack's grip tightened on the phone. You wanted revenge. There's a difference. Justice follows rules, respects human dignity, accepts that some questions don't have answers. Revenge just wants blood and doesn't care whose blood it is. Philosophical distinctions from a man who's about to lose everything. Vincent's voice carried certainty now. You think the FBI will protect you? You think federal agents care about some PTSD-addled teacher who can't let go of the past? They'll use you for whatever investigation value you provide, then discard you the moment it's convenient. That's how institutions work, Jack. They serve their own interests, not yours. Then I guess we'll find out. 48 hours. Vincent ignored Jack's defiance. I'm giving you 48 hours to reconsider my offer. Take the money, relocate Lily somewhere safe, disappear before this gets worse. Because it will get worse. You're fighting people who've made careers out of making problems disappear, and you're just one more problem. The call ended. Jack stood there in his hallway, staring at his phone, feeling the walls close in. Vincent was right about one thing: this was going to get worse. The excavation had been the easy part. Now came the investigation, the legal maneuvering, the slow grinding bureaucracy that could take years to produce results, while Vincent used those years to destroy Jack's credibility, his livelihood, his ability to protect Lily. A knock at the door. Jack tensed, hand automatically moving toward the Glock he'd started carrying since yesterday. But when he checked the peephole, he saw a familiar face. Travis Mercer, his son, standing on the porch looking uncomfortable and determined in equal measure. Jack's hand froze on the doorknob. He hadn't seen Travis in 5 years, not since Sarah's funeral when his son had accused him of killing her through neglect, of being so wrapped up in PTSD that he'd missed the signs of her cancer until it was too late. The words had been cruel and possibly true, and Jack had accepted them as the price of failures he couldn't undo. He opened the door. Travis had aged since the funeral, 34 now, but looking older, carrying stress in his shoulders and exhaustion in his eyes. He wore khakis and a button-down shirt, looking like he'd come from an office job, looking like someone who'd built a normal life away from his father's damage. Travis, Dad? The word came out stiff, unpracticed. I heard about what's happening, the federal agents, the investigation. I wanted to make sure you were okay. I'm managing. They stood there in awkward silence, years of estrangement filling the space between them. Finally, Travis looked past Jack into the house. Can I come in? Jack stepped aside, let his son enter the home Travis had visited exactly once in 14 years. The day Jack bought the place, before Sarah got sick, when they'd still been trying to maintain the fiction of family. Travis looked around, taking in the shabby furniture and cluttered surfaces and general air of a life barely maintained. You're living like this? It's clean, it's affordable, it's enough. Dad, this is... Travis stopped himself, recalibrating. I didn't come here to judge. I came because I saw the news coverage, and I know what Vincent Cross is capable of. The statement hung there, strange in its specificity. Jack studied his son, seeing details he'd missed at first. The expensive watch, the designer shoes, the car parked at the curb that cost more than Jack earned in 2 years. How do you know what Vincent's capable of? Travis wouldn't meet his eyes. I work for Cross Development Corporation, have for 3 years, business operations manager. It's a good job, pays well, has benefits. It's how I support Emma and the kids. Emma, Jack's daughter-in-law who he'd met twice. The kids, grandchildren he'd seen only in photos Travis's mother had shared before she died, because Travis certainly never sent updates. You work for Vincent Cross. Jack heard his own voice go flat, emotion draining into something worse than anger. The man who's trying to destroy me works for the man I raised. It's not like that. I didn't know about the Kuwait stuff, about Major Kellerman, about any of it. I just thought it was a development company, legitimate business. But now you know. Travis finally looked at him. Now I know. Vincent called me 3 days ago, told me to come here to talk to you, to convince you to sell the property. He said you were being unreasonable, that the land had environmental issues, that he was trying to help you avoid legal problems. And you believed him. I wanted to believe him. Travis's voice cracked slightly. Because if I didn't believe him, then I'd have to accept that I've been working for a war criminal, taking his money, helping build his empire while he used that empire to hurt people, including my own father. The admission settled between them, raw and painful. Jack wanted to feel vindicated, wanted to throw Travis's complicity back in his face, wanted to make his son hurt the way Jack had hurt for 5 years of silence and abandonment. But looking at Travis now, seeing the genuine anguish in his expression, Jack found he couldn't summon the cruelty. Why are you here? To warn you, and to help if you'll let me. Travis pulled out his phone, showed Jack a screen full of text messages. Vincent's planning to discredit you. He's got people at the VA ready to testify about your PTSD diagnosis, make you look unstable. He's pulling your employment records from the school district, looking for anything he can spin as proof you're unreliable. He's even contacted Travis, contacted me, asking for stories about how you neglected Mom, how you weren't there when she needed you. And did you give him those stories? No. Travis's voice went hard. That's when I realized this wasn't about property disputes or environmental issues. That's when I started asking questions, digging through company records, following money trails. And that's when I found out what Vincent really is. He pulled out a USB drive, handed it to Jack. Internal communications, financial records, evidence of shell companies and offshore accounts and payments that don't match any legitimate business purpose. I've been copying files for the past 2 days, building a case. It's not everything, but it's a start. Jack took the drive, felt its weight like a promise and a threat. Vincent will know you took this. He'll come after you. Probably, but I have some advantages he doesn't know about. Travis managed a weak smile. I'm good at my job. I know where the bodies are buried, metaphorically speaking, and I've been very careful to copy only files I had legitimate access to, so he can't claim I hacked anything. You'll lose your job. Maybe face criminal charges. I'll lose the job anyway once he realizes I'm not going to help him destroy you. And if there are charges, at least I'll face them doing the right thing instead of just collecting a paycheck from a criminal. Travis paused. I've spent 5 years being angry at you for not saving Mom, for being too broken to be the father I needed. But at least you were broken from trying to do the right thing, from standing up to people like Vincent. That's more than I can say for myself. Movement in the hallway, Lily appearing, drawn by voices. She stopped when she saw Travis, confusion crossing her face. This is your cousin Travis. Jack made the introduction, feeling the inadequacy of it. Travis, this is Lily. She's been living with me since the accident. Travis's expression shifted. Recognition and grief mixing. I heard about Uncle Mike and Aunt Jennifer. I'm sorry I didn't come to the funeral. I should have been there for you. It's fine. Lily's voice carried the flatness of someone who'd learned not to expect much from family. Uncle Jack was there. That was enough. The statement carried unintended weight, praise and condemnation in equal measure. Travis had abandoned his father, and in doing so had also abandoned the extended family that might have needed him. Jack had been there despite his own damage, had taken in a traumatized teenager, and tried to give her stability even though he barely had any himself. Atlas appeared beside Lily, assessing the new person in the house. The dog's posture stayed neutral. No aggression, but no friendliness either. Just watchfulness, waiting to see how this Travis person would behave before deciding whether he was pack or threat. Is that Atlas? Travis took a step forward, then stopped when the dog's eyes tracked the movement. I heard about him, Cole Brennan's partner. He's more than that now. Jack's hand found Atlas's head, the gesture automatic. He's family. Pulled Lily and me through more bad days than I can count. The four of them stood there, man, boy, girl, and dog, connected by blood and tragedy, and the strange gravity that pulled damaged things into orbit around each other. Jack wanted to believe this could be the beginning of repair, of family rebuilt from broken pieces. But Vincent's call still echoed in his memory, 48 hours until things got worse. And Travis's presence here might just be another complication instead of salvation. I should go. Travis glanced at his watch, expensive and ridiculous for someone about to lose his job. I just wanted to give you that drive, warn you about what's coming, and to say, he stopped, struggling with words. I'm sorry. For the funeral, for the silence, for working for Vincent in the first place. I'm going to try to make it right. Don't try. Just do it or don't. Jack's voice came out harsher than intended, years of hurt condensing into a moment. I don't need apologies. I need people who show up when it matters and stay until it's finished. Travis flinched but nodded. Then I'll show up. Whatever you need, whenever you need it, I'm here. He left before Jack could respond, before the moment could get more complicated than it already was. Through the window, Jack watched his son drive away in a car that cost more than everything Jack owned, heading back to a life that was about to implode because Travis had finally chosen conscience over comfort. Was that really your son? Lily's question carried genuine curiosity, no judgment. The one you never talk about? Yeah. He seems okay, sad but okay. He made choices. Now he's facing the consequences. Jack turned away from the window, found Lily watching him with those two knowing eyes. Just like I did, just like everyone does eventually. She was quiet for a moment, then, do you think he'll actually help, or will he disappear again when things get hard? I don't know, but I think he wants to try, and that's more than he's managed in 5 years. Jack pulled out the USB drive, stared at it. Tomorrow we'll see what's on here. Tonight we rest, because Travis is right about one thing. Vincent's planning his next move, and we need to be ready. That night, Jack couldn't sleep. He lay in bed listening to the house settle, to Lily breathing in the next room, to Atlas pacing the hallway on patrol. The USB drive sat on his nightstand, innocuous plastic containing information that might save them or might just give Vincent another angle of attack. Around 2 a.m., footsteps on the porch. Soft, careful, someone trying not to be heard. Jack was up instantly, grabbing the Glock, moving to the window. A figure in dark clothes stood at his front door, not knocking, just standing there like they were gathering courage. Jack moved to the door, checked the peephole. Maria Santos, wearing a bathrobe and slippers, holding a folder. He opened the door. It's 2 a.m. I couldn't sleep either, and I found something you need to see. She brushed past him into the living room, spread documents on the coffee table. I've been going through my files on Vincent, cross-referencing dates and locations, and I found this. A photograph dated August 15th, 2021, Kabul airport, the day of the bombing. But the photo wasn't of the attack. It was from 3 days before, showing a security meeting. American military personnel, Afghan forces, and several civilians in tactical gear who weren't identified in the official caption. Maria pointed to one of the civilians. That's Vincent Cross, or someone who looks exactly like him. 3 days before the bombing that killed Cole Brennan and 12 others. Jack's chest tightened. That doesn't prove anything. By itself, no, but look at this. She pulled out another document. Communications logs from the days before the attack. Someone changed the security protocols at Abbey's gate, removed barriers that would have prevented the bomber from getting close. The change was authorized by a State Department contractor whose company is owned by Cross Development Corporation. Jack finished the sentence, feeling pieces click into place. Vincent didn't just profit from the war on terror. He orchestrated parts of it, created chaos so he could profit from the cleanup, removed obstacles so attacks could succeed, then sold security solutions to prevent future attacks. Maria's voice shook with controlled rage. Cole died because Vincent needed casualties to justify new contracts. You can prove this? I can suggest it. The proof would require access to classified communications, internal State Department records, things I can't get without federal subpoenas. She looked at Jack. But now we have FBI attention. Now we have federal agents who might be willing to dig deeper. Jack thought about Agent Reeves, about the way she'd looked at the evidence from the container, about the possibility that someone in the federal bureaucracy might actually care about justice instead of just protecting institutional interests. We give this to the FBI tomorrow. All of it, your files, Travis's USB drive, everything we have. And then we pray that someone with authority decides that some crimes are worth pursuing even when they're committed by billionaires. Maria gathered her documents, preparing to leave. At the door, she paused. Jack, you understand what you're doing? This isn't just about holding Vincent accountable anymore. This is about challenging the entire system that created him, that protected him, that allowed him to profit from death and chaos for 30 years. The institutions you're counting on to deliver justice are the same institutions that enabled his crimes. I know, and you're doing it anyway. What else is there? Rolling over, taking his money, teaching him that victims are silent and justice is negotiable? Jack shook his head. I've spent 20 years being quiet about what I saw in Kuwait. I've spent 5 years being quiet about losing Sarah and Travis. I've spent every day since Lily moved in being quiet about how terrified I am that I'll fail her the way I failed everyone else. I'm done being quiet. Maria smiled, the first genuine smile Jack had seen from her since this started. Cole would be proud. So would your brother. Hell, so am I. After she left, Jack returned to bed but didn't sleep. Just lay there in the darkness, holding the truth about Vincent Cross, about Cole Brennan's death, about the vast machinery of corruption that had turned war into profit and death into opportunity. And somewhere across town, Vincent Cross probably wasn't sleeping either. Probably making calls, activating networks, preparing the counterattack that would come at dawn or the next day or whenever he decided Jack had run out of chances. The difference was that Vincent thought he was fighting to protect an empire. Jack was fighting to protect a 16-year-old girl and a broken dog in the memory of people who tried to do right in a world that punished righteousness. It wasn't a fair fight. But Jack had survived worse odds before, and he'd learned in Fallujah that sometimes the most dangerous fighters were the ones with nothing left to lose. Dawn broke over Copper Valley with the kind of light that promised heat and judgment in equal measure. Jack had given up on sleep around 4 a.m., instead sitting on his porch with coffee and the USB drive Travis had delivered, weighing options that all felt like variations of losing. Agent Reeves had called at 6:30, her voice professional, but carrying an edge Jack recognized from his own military days. The sound of someone who'd discovered something they wished they hadn't. Mr. Mercer, we need you to come to the Albuquerque field office today. We've reviewed preliminary evidence from the container, and there are questions only you can answer. What kind of questions? The kind that require a formal interview with full legal protections. A pause. Bring your lawyer, and Mr. Mercer, don't discuss this with anyone else. The investigation has expanded beyond what we initially anticipated. The call ended before Jack could ask what expanded meant. But he had suspicions. Vincent didn't build empires on isolated war crimes. He built them on networks, connections, decades of relationships with people who traded favors and looked the other way because everyone profited when no one asked questions. Frank Castellano arrived at 8, read the USB drive's contents on Jack's laptop, and went pale. This is explosive. Financial records linking cross-development to shell companies in the Caymans, communications about security solutions that read like coded references to weapons sales, payments to individuals who don't appear in any legitimate database. Frank pulled off his reading glasses, rubbed his eyes. Travis took massive risks copying this. If Vincent finds out, he already knows. Jack's phone had been buzzing with unknown numbers since 5 a.m., all of them going to voicemail, all of them presumably Vincent trying different approaches to the same conversation. The question is what he does about it. They drove to Albuquerque in Frank's car, leaving Lily with Maria and specific instructions to call Raymond if anything felt wrong. Atlas stayed with Lily. Jack had wanted to bring the dog, but Frank had pointed out that federal buildings had rules about animals, and fighting about service dog accommodations would waste time they didn't have. The separation felt wrong. Jack had barely been apart from Atlas since taking custody of the dog 18 months ago. They developed the kind of symbiotic relationship that comes from shared trauma, each providing the stability the other needed to function. But Lily needed protection more than Jack needed comfort. And Atlas understood that in the way working dogs understood priorities. The Albuquerque FBI field office occupied a nondescript building that screamed federal architecture. Functional, secure, designed to intimidate through sheer bureaucratic weight. Agent Reeves met them in the lobby, led them through security that involved surrender of phones and metal detectors, and the particular degradation of being searched by people who assumed everyone was a potential threat. The interview room was exactly what Jack expected. Sparse furniture, one-way mirror, recording equipment visible enough to remind you that nothing said here would ever be truly private. Reeves sat across from Jack, another agent beside her taking notes, while Frank positioned himself at Jack's right shoulder like a guardian. Mr. Mercer, I want to start by thanking you for your cooperation. What we found in Major Kellerman's container has opened several investigations, not just into events in Kuwait, but into a larger pattern of misconduct. Reeves pulled out a file, spread photographs on the table. Do you recognize these individuals? Jack looked at the images. Men in tactical gear, some faces he knew, others that were strangers. But one photo stopped him cold. Vincent, younger but unmistakable, standing beside a man Jack recognized from wanted posters and news reports. That's Michael Ferraro, arms dealer. He's in federal prison. He is. And 3 days ago, after learning about your case, Mr. Ferraro's attorney contacted us. Apparently, Mr. Ferraro has decided that 25 years in prison is preferable to taking the fall alone for crimes that involve numerous co-conspirators. Reeves tapped the photo. He's willing to testify that Vincent Cross facilitated weapons transfers to groups designated as terrorists, that Cross used his CIA credentials to bypass oversight, and that Cross personally ordered the execution of at least 3 people who threatened to expose his operations. The room seemed to tilt. Jack had known Vincent was dangerous, had suspected murder in Kellerman's case. But 3 confirmed kills, weapons to terrorists, decades of criminal conspiracy, it was almost too much to process. Why is he talking now? Because he's dying. Pancreatic cancer, stage 4. The doctors give him 6 months. Reeves's expression held no sympathy. Ferraro wants to unburden himself, wants his testimony to mean something before he's gone, and apparently he never liked Vincent much anyway. Cross treated him as a useful tool, not a partner, and criminals have egos just like everyone else. Frank leaned forward. What do you need from my client? Corroboration. Ferraro's testimony alone isn't enough. Defense attorneys will argue he's trying to reduce his sentence or settle old grudges. But if Jack can confirm details about Vincent's activities in Kuwait, about Kellerman's documentation efforts, about the circumstances of Kellerman's death, we can build a case that withstands scrutiny. For the next 3 hours, Jack walked them through Desert Storm, the forward operating base that officially didn't exist. The interrogations conducted in a concrete building that still smelled of fear and blood when Jack closed his eyes. Vincent's progressive descent from intelligence officer to torturer, the way legitimate questions had given way to rage-fueled brutality after Danny Cross died. He described Kellerman quiet, methodical, the kind of officer who followed rules because rules protected everyone, not just the powerful. Described how Kellerman had started recording interrogations after Vincent crossed lines that couldn't be uncrossed. Described the night Kellerman had pulled Jack aside, voice low and urgent. If something happens to me, someone needs to know what's in those recordings. Someone needs to make sure the truth doesn't die with me. And then Kellerman's death. The Jeep found overturned in the desert, Kellerman's neck broken, official investigation concluding mechanical failure despite the vehicle being nearly new and recently serviced. The way everyone had accepted the story because questioning it meant questioning CIA operations, and that was career suicide. I knew it was murder. Jack's voice had gone hoarse from talking, from reliving memories he'd tried to bury. Everyone knew, but knowing and proving are different things. And 25-year-old EOD techs don't have the authority or resources to challenge the story when superior officers say case closed. Reeves made notes, asked clarifying questions, circled back to details that didn't quite align. Professional, thorough, treating Jack's testimony like the foundation for something larger. When they finally broke for lunch, Frank pulled Jack into a private conference room. You're doing well. Stay factual. Don't speculate. Let the evidence speak. Frank hesitated. But there's something you should know. I have a contact at Justice who owes me a favor. He says there's pressure from above to slow walk this investigation. Vincent Cross has friends in places that matter, and they're making calls suggesting that dredging up 30-year-old allegations serves no purpose except damaging interagency relationships. So this is pointless. Even with Ferraro's testimony, even with Kellerman's recordings, Vincent walks because he knows the right people. Not pointless, just harder than it should be. Frank's expression hardened. But Reeves strikes me as the type who doesn't back down from pressure. And now that the investigation is officially open, closing it without charges would raise questions that make people nervous. Vincent's power isn't unlimited. It just feels that way when you're standing in his shadow. They reconvened after lunch, and Reeves shifted focus to more recent events. The container's discovery, Vincent's phone calls, the SUV following Lily. Jack walked them through each incident, sticking to observable facts, avoiding speculation about motive or intent. Then Reeves pulled out a laptop, turned it to face Jack. We've begun analyzing the financial records your son provided. Can you authenticate that these came from Cross Development Corporation's internal systems? Jack looked at the screen, saw files with headers and formatting that matched what Travis had shown him. I can confirm that Travis worked for Cross Development and had access to financial systems. But I can't personally verify these specific documents are authentic. We can, and what they show is a money laundering operation running through 17 shell companies, facilitating payments that correlate with known weapons shipments, mercenary deployments, and government contracts awarded under suspicious circumstances. Reeves closed the laptop. Mr. Mercer, your son's evidence may be what finally brings Vincent Cross down, but it also means your son is now a target. Has Travis indicated where he's staying, whether he's taken security precautions? Jack's stomach dropped. In the urgency of the interview, he'd almost forgotten that Travis had just betrayed a man who'd ordered at least 3 murders. He didn't say, I don't even have his current phone number. We need to locate him. If Vincent perceives Travis as a threat. Reeves stopped, left the implication hanging. Frank cut in, are you offering protective custody? I'm offering to try, but witness protection requires voluntary participation, and unless Travis requests it, we can't force him into a safe house. Reeves looked at Jack. Can you contact him? Convince him to come in? I can try, but we haven't spoken in 5 years before yesterday. I'm not sure he'll listen to me. Jack tried calling Travis from the FBI office phone. His own cell was still locked in security. The number rang 4 times, then went to voicemail. Jack left a message, voice steady despite the fear clawing at his chest. Travis, it's your father. The FBI needs to talk to you about the documents you gave me. Please call Agent Reeves at this number. And Travis, be careful. Vincent knows what you did. 3 more calls over the next hour, all going to voicemail. Reeves tried alternate methods, contacting Travis's employer who claimed he'd called in sick, checking his home address in Tucson, no answer, reaching out to Travis's wife Emma, phone disconnected. He's gone underground. Reeves's assessment came flat, professional concern masking what Jack suspected was genuine worry. Smart move, actually. Vincent can't retaliate against someone he can't find, unless Vincent already found him. The thought lodged in Jack's mind like shrapnel, impossible to remove. Travis had walked into this fight less than 24 hours ago, driven by guilt and belated conscience. He didn't have Jack's combat training or Maria's institutional knowledge, or even basic understanding of how men like Vincent operated. He just had good intentions and incriminating files, and that combination tended to get people killed. The interview wrapped up around 6 p.m. Reeves promised to maintain contact, warned Jack that Vincent would likely escalate now that federal investigation was active, suggested, without quite making it an order, that Jack consider relocating temporarily while things played out. Jack declined. Running meant leaving Lily exposed, leaving Maria vulnerable, abandoning the home he'd built from scratch after Sarah died. And more fundamentally, running meant admitting that Vincent's power was absolute, that wealth and connections trumped truth, that some fights weren't worth fighting. He'd spent too many years running from Fallujah, from his failures as a husband and father, from the nightmares that made sleep impossible and medication necessary and therapy pointless. If he was going to stand his ground anywhere, it would be here, on land that held 30 years of secrets and one old dude and a traumatized teenager who'd lost too much already. The drive back to Copper Valley took 2 hours through desert that looked hostile even in fading light. Frank dropped Jack at his house, promised to call if anything developed, drove away leaving Jack alone with the crushing weight of everything that could go wrong. Maria's porch light was on, the signal they'd arranged meaning Lily was safe, everything normal, no emergencies. Jack walked over anyway, needed to see his niece with his own eyes, needed Atlas's presence to ground him after a day of reliving trauma and building cases against monsters. Maria opened the door before he knocked. How bad? Bad enough that the FBI is taking it seriously. Good enough that Vincent's running scared. Jack stepped inside, found Lily on the couch with Atlas sprawled across her lap, despite being far too large for lapdog duties. Any problems here? 3 cars drove past slowly. Might have been surveillance. Might have been neighbors being nosy. Raymond sent a deputy to patrol the street every hour. Maria handed Jack a beer he hadn't asked for but desperately needed. Your son called. Jack's head snapped up. Travis, when? About an hour ago. Wouldn't say where he was, just that he was safe, and to tell you he was sorry for bringing danger to your door. Maria's expression softened slightly. He sounded scared, Jack. Young and scared and out of his depth. Did he leave a number? Blocked. But he said he'd call again tomorrow, that he had more information to share, but needed to verify it first. She paused. He also said to tell you that Emma and the kids are safe. He sent them to her sister's place in Oregon before this started. Relief flooded through Jack, followed immediately by shame that he'd needed reassurance about grandchildren he'd never met, a daughter-in-law he barely knew. Travis had been thinking 3 steps ahead, while Jack was still processing step 1. That was tactical awareness Jack should have taught his son, but apparently Travis had learned elsewhere. Lily looked up from the couch. Is Travis going to die? The question landed like a punch. No preamble, no softening, just the stark terror of a 16-year-old who'd already lost her parents and understood that adults died when powerful people wanted them dead. I don't know. Jack couldn't lie to her, couldn't offer false comfort. He's in danger, but he's smart and he's trying to be careful, and sometimes that's enough. It wasn't enough for my parents. They were careful. Dad always wore his seatbelt. Mom always checked blind spots. But careful doesn't stop drunk drivers from crossing medians at 70 miles an hour. The logic was unassailable and devastating. Lily had learned the lesson Jack had learned in Fallujah. That caution and preparation and following rules didn't guarantee survival. That sometimes death came for no reason except you were in the wrong place when violence happened to be passing through. You're right. Careful isn't a guarantee, but it improves the odds, and odds are all anyone gets. Jack sat down beside her, careful not to disturb Atlas. Your dad took risks his whole life. Spoke up when it was easier to stay quiet, challenged injustice when ignoring it would have been safer. He died because someone else made a terrible choice, but he lived the way he wanted to live. That has to count for something. Does it? Count for something? Lily's voice carried the weight of grief that hadn't fully processed yet, might never fully process. Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like good people die and bad people get rich, and the only thing that counts is having enough money to make consequences disappear. Jack didn't have an answer that would satisfy her, couldn't offer platitudes about justice or karma, or the moral arc of the universe bending toward righteousness. He'd seen too much evidence to the contrary, buried too many people who'd done nothing wrong except exist in proximity to power. So instead, he just sat there, presence substituting for wisdom, while Atlas provided the comfort Jack couldn't, and Maria moved around her kitchen making dinner for people too stressed to eat, but who needed the ritual of normalcy. They were finishing silent meal when headlights swept across the window. Not the slow patrol of Raymond's deputy. Fast, aggressive, multiple vehicles moving in formation. Jack was up instantly, moving to the window, hand instinctively reaching for the Glock he'd retrieved from FBI security. 3 SUVs, black, tinted windows, pulling into his driveway and blocking the street. Doors opening, figures emerging in tactical gear. Not police, not federal agents. Private security, the kind Vincent employed for problems that required deniability. Lily, upstairs, now! Jack's voice came out steady despite adrenaline spiking. Maria, call Raymond. Tell him we have armed intruders. Atlas had already positioned himself between Lily and the door, hackles raised, that low growl that preceded violence. The dog knew what combat felt like, recognized the pre-attack tension. The front door exploded inward. Not picked, not forced with tools, just kicked open by someone who didn't care about subtlety. 3 men entered, weapons drawn, faces covered, moving with military precision that said these weren't random thugs. "Jack Mercer, you need to come with us." The lead man's voice came muffled through his mask, but the authority was clear. "Vincent Cross wants to talk. You can walk out or we can carry you. Your choice." Jack's mind raced through options. Fight, but he was outnumbered and outgunned, and fighting meant Lily and Maria caught in crossfire. Run, but there was nowhere to run, no back exit that these professionals wouldn't have covered. Comply, but going with them likely meant disappearing, becoming one more problem Vincent solved permanently. "I'm not going anywhere." Wrong answer. The lead man raised his weapon, not pointing at Jack, but making the threat explicit. His companions spread out, covering angles, boxing Jack in with professional efficiency. Then Atlas moved. Not attacking, the dog was too well trained for that, understood that aggression would get everyone killed. Instead, he positioned himself directly in the line of fire, body between Jack and the weapons, making it impossible to shoot Jack without shooting through a dog first. Control your animal. He is controlled. He's protecting his handler. That's what military working dogs do. Jack's hand found Atlas's collar, fingers tangling in fur, feeling the tension vibrating through the dog's frame. "You shoot him, you'll have to explain to Vincent why his hired muscle killed a decorated war hero's service dog. That's the kind of publicity even billionaires can't buy their way out of." The lead man hesitated. In that hesitation, Jack heard sirens, distant but approaching. Raymond's response to Maria's call. The tactical team heard them too, body language shifting from aggressive to calculating. "This isn't over. Vincent's giving you one more chance to be smart. Take his offer, sell the property, disappear. Because next time we come, we won't be asking nicely." They withdrew as quickly as they had entered, leaving Jack's front door hanging crooked and his living room smelling of gun oil and implied violence. The SUVs peeled out seconds before Raymond's cruiser turned the corner, passing each other with mere feet to spare. Raymond came in with weapon drawn, found Jack standing in his ruined doorway with Atlas still on guard and Maria already on her phone to the FBI field office. "What happened?" Vincent Cross sent a message. 3 armed men, military tactical gear, threatened to kidnap me if I didn't accept his buyout offer. Jack's voice sounded distant to his own ears, shock setting in now that immediate danger had passed. "Atlas stopped them, just by being here, being willing to die before letting them take me." Raymond holstered his weapon, surveyed the damage. "I'm calling in state police. This is beyond local jurisdiction. Armed home invasion, attempted kidnapping, interstate criminal conspiracy." Vincent's crossed lines that even his lawyers can't uncross. But Jack barely heard him. He was kneeling beside Atlas, arms wrapped around the dog, feeling the elevated heartbeat gradually slow as combat readiness faded. The dog had been willing to take a bullet, had placed himself in harm's way with the same trained certainty he'd shown clearing buildings in Afghanistan. "You're a good boy. The best boy." Jack's voice cracked, emotion overwhelming the control he'd maintained through the entire confrontation. "I'm sorry I keep putting you in danger. I'm sorry this keeps happening." Atlas licked his face once, then returned to vigilance, scanning the room for threats that might still be lurking. Working dogs didn't dwell on past danger. They prepared for the next one, eternal readiness, the price of keeping their packs safe. Lily appeared at the top of the stairs, pale and shaking. "Are they gone?" "For now." Jack stood, forced steadiness into his posture. "Pack a bag. We're staying at Maria's tonight. This house isn't secure anymore." They relocated across the yard, Maria already preparing the guest room and making phone calls to activate her network of former military contacts. Jack sat on the couch and tried to process what had just happened, what it meant that Vincent had escalated from threats to action. His phone rang. The burner number Frank had given him for emergencies. Jack answered, heard his lawyer's voice tight with barely controlled rage. "Jack, I just got a call from a contact at DOJ. Vincent Cross filed a lawsuit this afternoon. Defamation, harassment, intentional infliction of emotional distress. He's claiming you fabricated evidence against him as retaliation for a property dispute. The suit names you, Maria, Travis, and the FBI agents investigating the case." That's insane. The evidence came from his own container, from his own employee. Insane but effective. The suit includes a motion for restraining order, preventing you from making further allegations pending trial. If the judge grants it, you'll be legally prohibited from cooperating with the federal investigation. Frank's exhale carried exhaustion. Vincent's using the legal system as a weapon. Even if he loses eventually, the process will take years and cost hundreds of thousands in legal fees you don't have. So he wins by drowning me in litigation. He wins by making the truth too expensive to pursue. It's a tactic oligarchs have used for decades. You can't beat someone in court if you can't afford to get to court. Pause. But there might be a way around it. If Travis testifies publicly, makes the evidence part of official record, Vincent can't suppress it through civil suits. The First Amendment protects congressional testimony. Travis won't even answer his phone. How am I supposed to convince him to testify before Congress? You don't. I do. Frank's voice carried grim determination. I have friends on the Senate Armed Services Committee. They've been looking for an excuse to investigate defense contractor corruption. Your case might be exactly the opening they need. After the call ended, Jack sat in Maria's living room and felt the walls closing in. Vincent had resources Jack couldn't match. Lawyers who cost more per hour than Jack earned in a week. Connections that reached into Justice Department and federal courts. Tactical teams willing to break into homes and threaten families. All Jack had was truth and stubbornness in a dog who'd taken 3 bullets in Afghanistan and was prepared to take more in New Mexico if that's what protecting his pack required. Maria appeared with coffee, sat down beside him. You're thinking about giving up. I'm thinking about odds. Vincent's lawsuit, his tactical team, his political connections. I can't fight all of that. Maybe the smart play is taking his money and running before someone gets killed. Someone's already been killed. 3 someones, according to Ferraro's testimony. Probably more we don't know about. Maria's voice carried the hard edge of someone who'd spent 40 years in military culture. And you running won't save Travis or make the lawsuit disappear. It'll just prove to Vincent that threats work, that he can terrorize anyone who challenges him. So what do I do? What you've always done. Survive until the enemy makes a mistake. She smiled slightly. Vincent's getting desperate. Desperate people escalate, and escalation creates exposure. Those men who broke into your house, that's evidence. The lawsuit, that's panic masquerading as power. He's making moves that can be tracked, documented, used against him. Or he's making moves that get me killed before any of that matters. Then we make sure you don't die alone. Maria's expression hardened. I'm old, Jack. I've lived a full life, trained thousands of dogs, seen things most people only read about. If this is where my story ends, fighting alongside someone who actually gives a damn about justice, I can accept that. The words settled over Jack like a weight and a gift. He'd been alone since Sarah died, had pushed away Travis and isolated himself and tried to handle everything through sheer stubborn independence. But that wasn't how anyone survived wars. You survived through squad cohesion, through watching each other's backs, through accepting that some fights required collective action. His phone buzzed. Text from unknown number. Dad, it's Travis. I'm at the old cabin near Cloudcroft. Need to see you. Come alone. Jack showed the message to Maria. She frowned. Could be Vincent's people. Using Travis's phone to lure you into an ambush. Could be, but if it's really Travis and I don't go and something happens to him, Jack couldn't finish the sentence. Then I'm coming with you, and we bring Atlas. If it's an ambush, you'll need backup. If it's really Travis, you'll need witnesses for whatever he wants to share. They left at midnight, after Lily was asleep, and Raymond had posted a deputy at Maria's house with instructions to call if anything moved. The drive to Cloudcroft took 90 minutes through mountain roads that climbed from desert into pine forest, temperature dropping 20 degrees as elevation increased. The cabin appeared in their headlights, weathered structure that Jack's brother had bought years ago as a hunting retreat, place the family had visited during happier times when Travis was a boy and Sarah was alive and the world felt manageable. Travis's car sat in the driveway, lights off, no visible movement. Jack and Maria approached carefully, Atlas ranging ahead, using the dog's senses to detect threats human perception would miss. The cabin door opened. Travis stood there, backlit by kerosene lantern, looking haggard and wired and 20 years older than yesterday. Thank God, I was starting to think you wouldn't come. He pulled Jack inside, checked the road before closing the door. I've been monitoring Vincent's communications. He knows about the FBI interview, about Ferraro's testimony. He's planning something tonight. I couldn't get details, but there were references to permanent solutions in eliminating variables. Variables meaning people. Maria moved to the window, scanning the tree line. Vincent's decided that threats aren't working, so he's moving to direct action. Travis nodded, pulled out a laptop. I've been documenting everything. His phone calls, his meetings, the people he's contacted in the past 48 hours. It's all here, time-stamped and backed up to cloud servers he can't access. He looked at Jack, genuine fear showing through. But I think he knows I'm doing it. I think he's got people looking for me. Then you need to disappear for real. FBI protection, new identity, the whole program. I can't. Emma and the kids are in Oregon, but Vincent has resources everywhere. If I disappear into witness protection, I'll spend the rest of my life looking over my shoulder, wondering if every stranger is an assassin. Travis's jaw set in a way that reminded Jack painfully of himself. I'd rather fight and lose than spend decades running. The words hung there, familiar in their desperation. Jack had made similar calculations in Fallujah, in Kuwait. In every moment when staying meant danger, but running meant abandoning the people who counted on you. Atlas's bark shattered the moment. Sharp, urgent, the alert signal for incoming threat. Through the window, headlights appeared on the access road, multiple vehicles moving fast. Back door. Now. Jack grabbed the laptop, shoved it at Maria. Get this to Raymond. If we don't make it out, make sure the FBI gets everything. Jack, go! Maria ran, her 73-year-old body moving with surprising speed born of decades of crisis training. Jack and Travis positioned themselves at windows, preparing for what came next. The vehicle stopped 50 yards out, headlights illuminating the cabin. Doors open, figures emerged, too many to count in the glare. And then a voice, amplified by megaphone, familiar in its measured contempt. Jack Mercer, Travis Mercer, I'm giving you 30 seconds to come out. We can talk like civilized people, or we can do this the hard way. Vincent, here personally, which meant he'd move past delegation into direct action. That was either confidence or desperation, and Jack suspected it was both. What do you want, Vince? To end this. Peacefully, if possible. You drop the FBI cooperation, Travis returns my property and resigns quietly, and everyone walks away intact. No more violence, no more lawsuits, no more federal agents digging through 30-year-old history that benefits no one, except the people you murdered. Kellerman, those 3 Ferraro mentioned, probably Cole Brennan and 12 other Marines. They might have benefited from justice. Justice? Vincent's laugh carried across the clearing. You think this is about justice? This is about you refusing to accept that some fights are unwinnable, that some people have earned the right to operate above rules designed for smaller men. No one operates above rules. You just operated above them long enough that you forgot there were consequences. Consequences. The word dripped with contempt. I'll tell you about consequences, Jack. In 30 seconds, if you and Travis don't walk out with hands visible, my people will burn that cabin to the ground. You'll die in there, and the official story will be that you and your son had a confrontation about his betrayal. Things got violent, and the fire was accidental. By the time anyone questions it, the evidence will be ash, and my lawyers will have buried the investigation in paperwork. Jack looked at Travis, saw his own fear reflected back. This was Vincent's endgame. Eliminate the witnesses, destroy the evidence, rewrite the narrative. Simple, brutal, effective. What about Atlas? Jack's voice came out steadier than he felt. You going to kill a war hero's dog, too? The dog's a variable like any other. Sentimental attachment doesn't change tactical reality. Vincent paused. 20 seconds, Jack. This is your last chance to be smart. Atlas stood at Jack's side, body tense but controlled, waiting for the command that would tell him whether to fight or hold position. The dog had survived worse odds in Afghanistan, had fought through ambushes and explosions and the death of his first handler. But that was military combat with rules of engagement in backup and extraction plans. This was murder dressed up as property dispute, and Vincent had made sure there would be no witnesses, no support, no way out. Jack's hand found his phone, managed to send one message before Vincent's timeline expired. Maria, Vincent at cabin, tell FBI everything, make it count. Time's up, Jack. What's your decision? Jack looked at his son, saw the man Travis had become, flawed, compromised by choices that seemed sensible at the time, but ultimately willing to choose conscience over survival. Saw his brother in Travis's face, saw Sarah's determination, saw the family he'd failed in a dozen ways, but who'd still produced someone capable of risking everything for what was right. We're coming out, but not to surrender, to tell you something you need to hear. He opened the cabin door, stepped onto the porch with hands visible, but not raised. Travis beside him, Atlas between them. The headlights made it impossible to see how many people Vincent had brought, but Jack counted at least 8 figures in tactical positions. Vincent stood at the front, illuminated by his own vehicle's headlights, looking exactly like what he was. A man who'd built an empire on other people's deaths and was willing to add 2 more bodies to protect it. I'm listening. You talk about being above rules, about earning the right to operate without consequences. But that's not how civilization works. Rules exist because without them, we're just animals fighting over territory. And the moment we accept that some people get to operate above those rules, we're accepting that might makes right, that wealth equals virtue, that power justifies itself. Jack took a step forward, felt Atlas move with him. I'm not going to surrender. I'm not going to let you burn this cabin or rewrite this story or make my son and me disappear. Because doing that would mean accepting your logic, accepting that you've won not through being right, but through being willing to do things decent people won't do. Brave speech, ultimately meaningless. Vincent gestured, and his tactical team raised weapons. Last chance, Jack. Walk away or die here proving points no one will remember. Someone will remember. Jack's voice carried certainty he didn't entirely feel. Maria's already halfway to Raymond's office with Travis's evidence. The FBI knows we're here, and even if you kill us, even if you burn the cabin and destroy the evidence, you'll have made a mistake that can't be undone. What mistake? Thinking that killing people solves problems. It doesn't. It just creates new problems, new investigations, new people asking questions you can't answer. Kellerman taught me that. You killed him, but you couldn't kill his recordings. You can kill me, but you can't kill federal interest in a case that's already gone public. For the first time since this started, Vincent's confidence flickered. Not much, just a slight tightening around his eyes, a micro-expression that suggested Jack's words had landed. Then headlights appeared on the access road behind Vincent's convoy. Multiple vehicles moving fast, unmistakably federal in their formation. The FBI had arrived. Maria had made it to Raymond. Raymond had contacted Agent Reeves, and now Vincent's private execution was about to become a federal incident with dozens of witnesses. Vincent saw it too, saw his window closing, made the calculation that men like him always made when caught between pride and survival. This isn't over. Yes, it is, Jack's voice carried finality. You just haven't accepted it yet. The FBI vehicle stopped, agents emerging with weapons drawn, and Vincent, billionaire, war criminal, murderer, finally understood that some fights couldn't be won through money or threats or violence. Some fights required actually being right, and Vincent had spent 30 years being wrong in ways that compounded until the weight of his crimes became inescapable. Agent Reeves walked past Vincent's tactical team, who wisely holstered weapons when faced with federal authority, and approached Jack with an expression mixing relief and exasperation. Mr. Mercer, when I suggested you take security precautions, I didn't mean engage in armed standoffs with the subject of our investigation. Noted for next time. There won't be a next time. Vincent Cross, you're under arrest for attempted kidnapping, witness intimidation, and about 15 other charges I'll think of during the drive to Albuquerque. She gestured to her team. Read him his rights, and someone get a statement from the tactical team about who hired them and what their orders were. Vincent's arrest happened with surprising lack of drama. He went quietly, knowing that resisting would just add charges, trusting his lawyers to have him out on bail before morning. But something had shifted. The absolute confidence had cracked, replaced by the first genuine uncertainty Jack had seen in Vincent's expression. Travis collapsed onto the cabin steps, adrenaline draining. We're alive. I can't believe we're actually alive. Barely. Jack sat beside his son, felt decades of distance compress into this moment of shared survival. You did good, running the communications intercepts, getting the evidence to safety. Your mother would be proud. She'd be terrified, and then proud, and then she'd lecture us both about taking unnecessary risks. Travis managed a weak smile. But yeah, maybe proud. Atlas climbed the steps, positioned himself between Jack and the darkness, still maintaining watch even though the immediate threat had passed. The dog's dedication was absolute, unwavering, the kind of loyalty that transcended species and circumstance. Jack's hand found Atlas's head, scratched behind the ears the way the dog liked. Good boy, best boy, you kept us alive again. The next weeks moved fast. Thomas Kellerman Jr. came forward with his father's backup recordings. Michael Ferraro provided detailed testimony from his hospital bed. Travis entered witness protection temporarily, then testified before the Senate Armed Services Committee in hearings that made national news. The evidence was overwhelming. Vincent's lawyers filed motions, sought delays, tried every tactical maneuver they knew. But the pattern was too clear, too well documented, too many sources confirming the same crime stretching across 3 decades. 3 weeks after the cabin standoff, Maria Santos died, not from violence, from pneumonia that her 73-year-old body couldn't fight after years of exposure to military chemicals and desert dust. She'd lived long enough to see Vincent arrested, long enough to know that Cole Brennan's death would finally be investigated, long enough to make Jack promise he'd continue her work training service dogs for veterans. Jack kept that promise. Used the money from a book deal, his testimony had attracted publisher interest, to establish the Maria Santos Memorial Canine Center. Travis came back from witness protection to help run it, bringing Emma and the kids, rebuilding the family that had fractured when Sarah died. 6 months after that night at the cabin, Vincent accepted a plea deal, 30 years in federal prison without possibility of parole. His empire collapsed. His contracts were canceled. His name became synonymous with the kind of corruption that happens when power operates without accountability. Jack didn't attend the sentencing. He had more important things to do: training dogs, teaching Travis and Lily how to work with animals that had seen combat, building something that honored the dead by helping the living. That evening, after the day's work was done, Jack sat on his porch. Atlas lay beside him, gray now threading through his muzzle, moving slower but still alert, still ready to protect if needed. Travis appeared with 2 beers, handed one to Jack, sat down without asking. They'd been doing this most evenings, quiet time together, rebuilding connection through presence rather than words. Maria would have liked the center, Travis said after a while. Cole too. Yeah. Jack scratched Atlas's ears, felt the dog lean into the touch. They would have. Lily came out, followed by Travis's kids, Jack's grandchildren, who he was finally getting to know. They surrounded Atlas, gentle hands petting the old war dog, and Atlas bore it with patient dignity, understanding that protecting the young was part of his mission. Jack watched them all, his son, his niece, his grandchildren, his dog, and felt something he hadn't felt in years. Not happiness exactly, not peace, but purpose. The sense that broken things could be useful, that trauma could be transformed into something that helped others survive their own darkness. You know what I keep thinking about? Travis's voice pulled Jack from his thoughts. What you said to Vincent at the cabin, about rules and civilization, and how accepting that some people operate above consequences means accepting that might makes right. Yeah, I spent 3 years working for him, taking his money, helping build his empire, because I thought that's how the world worked, that power justified itself, that success meant you were doing something right. Travis took a long drink. You taught me different, not through lectures or lessons, just by being stubborn enough to stand up to someone everyone else was afraid of. I was terrified. I know. But you did it anyway. That's the lesson. Travis smiled slightly. Mom used to say that courage wasn't not being afraid. It was being afraid and doing the right thing anyway. Jack's throat tightened. She was smarter than both of us. She was, and she loved you. Even when you couldn't love yourself, even when the PTSD made you impossible to live with, she loved you. Travis paused. I'm sorry I blamed you for not saving her. That wasn't fair. It was fair. I should have noticed the signs sooner. Maybe, or maybe cancer just happens and there's no one to blame. Travis looked at his kids playing with Atlas. Either way, I wasted 5 years being angry instead of being family. I don't want to waste any more. They sat in comfortable silence as the sun dropped toward the horizon, painting the desert in shades of gold and amber. Atlas dozed, surrounded by children who would never know war, but would grow up understanding loyalty and service through this old dog's example. Somewhere in a federal prison, Vincent Cross was beginning a sentence that would end with his death. His wealth had been seized, his reputation destroyed, his name stripped of the respectability money had bought. But here on this porch, in this moment, none of that mattered. What mattered was family, broken, reconstituted, held together by choice rather than blood. What mattered was purpose, training dogs to help veterans, honoring the dead by serving the living. What mattered was understanding that some wars were worth fighting even when you couldn't win, because the fight itself was the point. Jack's hand rested on Atlas's head, feeling the steady rise and fall of breathing, the warmth of life that had survived war and bombs, in the death of handlers, in the endless readiness that defined working dogs. "You did good, boy," Jack whispered. "You did so good." Atlas's tail wagged once. Acknowledgement, agreement. The simple certainty of a dog who knew his worth not through medals or recognition, but through the lives he'd saved and the pack he'd protected. The desert wind carried the smell of sage and dust and the promise of heat when morning came. But for now, the evening was cool, the stars were appearing, and Jack Mercer, broken veteran, imperfect father, reluctant hero, was exactly where he needed to be. Home,